Okay, WCW, Unmistakable Jimmy. Was Big Mama from Starrcade 85 really Jimmy Valiant's wife/girlfriend? Are they still together?
Yes and no. Felicia. Big Mama was Felicia, and they are not still together. Jimmy has been married, I guess, about 20 years now or so, to a very nice woman named Angel. I don't know where Felicia is. They were together for some time. Don't know where she is now, and I stay out of other people's marital situations, so I will leave it at that.
Very good. Justin and Erica was making fun of David Crockett on WCW. As fun as it looked. Sometime around Christmas 1986, you came out for an interview segment, as was the norm at that time, with a piece of paper and told Crockett that it was an enrollment to the Columbia Broadcasting School and suggested he make use of it.
I also said, when I just pointed at him one time, said, "See what happens when a fetus doesn't get enough oxygen." It was so... I like David, and David was just, he was so... I don't want to use the word pompous with his honor. He had to be a baby face. And David, I'd say that David had to be a baby face to the point of not wanting to back up or even act like he was offended by the heels and everything. And I used to blister him because he'd just stand there and you could tell he's kind of burning. And some of his commentary, like when it was the Superstars on the first TBS special, Superstars on the Superstation. I think was it Ronnie Garvin and Ric Flair on that one, and Garvin grabs Flair. He does the old deal where he twists his nose like that and slaps it. And David's like, "He's got him by the hunker." Or when Riggy Morton had the belt and was about to whip me, whip him like a dog. He had to be so babyface. It was just so easy to stick David. Well, one time we're at TBS and he got really hot at me because this was right when. It was either when Madonna and Sean Penn had broken up or when Joan Collins and her husband Peter Holm had broken up. Because I used to try to push it a little bit, see what I could say on TBS back when you couldn't cuss or say anything out of the way on wrestling. I said, Sweet Stan Lane, the gangster of love, he's the women's pet, the men's regret. I said, for example, Madonna and Sean Penn broke up, Sweet Stan could be Madonna's next Sean. Joan Collins and Peter Holm broke up. Sweet Stan could be Joan Collins' next Peter. You never know what David's, "Oh, you can't say that." I said, "They're Christian names, David, Christian names." And I used to say this edgy shit, and he'd come back and he'd be like, "You can't say that. They're going to kick us off the air." I'm totally innocent.
Excellent. Brad Dykens, Online World of Wrestling. What are your thoughts on Lex Luger when he started out in the business, then at the height of his success? Lastly, what do you think of Lex now?
I always got along with Package. He was... Lex was never a wrestling fan. For example, I sat next to him one time on a plane. We were in first class. He got a first class ticket, and I used my frequent flyer $30 upgrade. And we're sitting next to each other, and just for conversation, I said, "Package," I said, "you used to play football in Memphis. Did you ever watch the Memphis Wrestling Show?" And he said, "Well, it used to be on, when we'd come back from practice on Saturday morning or whatever, but I never watched wrestling." He didn't realize how he came off sometimes to some people. He was a very educated guy and the total package. He was educated, he had the body and the genetics and everything. He didn't realize that he came off some like superior sometimes. Because I said, "Well, what would you have done?" Just for fun and giggles, I said, "What would you have done if you'd have had to work in Memphis for, at that time, the late 80s, it was, guys were making $300 a week there. The big money had been previously." And he said, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that." Well, I understood, and I didn't have a problem with it, but a lot of times he would say, "Well, I wouldn't have done that." Well, it's to a guy who was doing that. "Well, why are you fucking better than me?" So I think the thing that hurt Lex in the business was that he was so intelligent and so good looking and had a big contract, the first big contract that Crockett ever gave out. He came off as aloof to the people and like he really didn't mean what he was saying because he wasn't a wrestling fan. He wasn't into the business. He just didn't have the emotion that you would have if you, like Flair, who loved the business and bled and sweat and everything, breathed and slept the business. Lex just didn't connect with people. He seemed like he was kind of above them. But he was fun. One time we're driving to someplace, a WCW show. Bobby is standing in the back, I'm driving, and Lex is in the front seat, and we stopped at Wendy's. And Lex got like a baked potato, right? I got to triple. Extra cheese, extra mayo, the grease is down to, and I'm fucking driving, I'm gnawing on this thing, and he's looking at me like I got a steaming turd hanging out of my mouth. And I said, "Package, how long has it been since you've had a cheeseburger?" He said, Well, Jimmy, I had some French fries about 6 months ago. I said, your body would just go into some kind of anaphylactic shock if you fucking, But I said, one of these days, I guess cholesterol will catch up with me. And by the way, it finally did. I'm almost 50, but, it's only 203. But we got to stop these things before they get too far. But anyway, Lex, I like Lex. I saw him last a couple years ago at the Charlotte Convention. He's had a lot of health problems, and I don't know. He had so many health problems. You couldn't connect it to steroids or any one thing. Like, he didn't take a ton of bumps, but he did take bumps over the years. But not to that extent. But he had the paralyzation from the compressed thing or what. I don't know. I'm not his doctor, but it's sad to see a guy who was so physically impressive be sidelined like that. But I understand he's a happier guy personally now.
Okay. So Joano Barros.
Boy, he's really trying to hurry me up.
I gotta get you. We got good stuff coming, buddy.
It takes me an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
How do you make a watch again? Who is a better partner for Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey or Stan Lane?
Oh, you fucking troublemaker.
That's got to be there. It's got to be there.
See, I'm not trying to pick my favorite children, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible so I can drone on about the fucking rest of the questions. I think that Dennis Condrey was a better heel. I think that Stan Lane was a flashier worker. I think that Bob Eaton and Dennis Condrey were better for Mid-South Wrestling and for the early time that we were working with the NWA, but when we were positioned as the top tag team that had to get heat and had to draw money. Dennis Condrey's work, there's never been anybody work anything like him. He was so precise, no wasted motion, everything crisp. He was in the right place at the right time. He never made a false step. But at the same time, when Stan came along, that's when pay-per-view came along. And the national television and the main event matches on TV. And Stan's a pretty motherfucker, no doubt about it. Stan Lane is a good-looking guy and just tremendous genetics and looks nowhere near his age even today. So he was flashier for when we didn't need to get so much heat. When it was about Dennis and Bobby had great matches too, but they concentrated on getting heat and selling tickets. With Stan, we were put in a position where we were to have the great match of the show. And with the other great tag teams, so whether it be the Rock and Roll of the Fantastics or Tully and Arn or, whatever, Stan and Bobby got a chance to develop more teamwork, and plus there's more evidence of them on tape, because in the early days with Dennis, the house shows weren't taped. So anyway, for the time, each one were best for their...
You did that well.
It's true.
You did
it's
well.
true. I'm not trying to weasel out of anything. Read the next
Scott Crone. Why on earth was Starrcade 87 moved from Georgia to fucking Chicago? And why was the entire show a flop given the talent booked? The entire show was horrible and had such great talent. It's one of those so bad it's good shows, but seriously, what the fuck?
Well, Starrcade 87 was moved from Greensboro and Georgia. 85 and 86 had been half in Atlanta, Omni, half in Greensboro Coliseum. Originally it was a Greensboro show entirely. Mm-hmm. But then they did the closed circuit thing, boom, boom, boom. But in Starrcade 87, Crockett had just purchased the UWF, and he had snapped up Florida and Kansas City at that point, and Vince was expanding, and WrestleMania 3 had been on pay-per-view. And point is, they went to Jim Crockett and sold him on the idea that here's Vince McMahon coming from New York City and we're coming from Greensboro. Nobody knows where Greensboro is. Or Atlanta. We need to be in a big major market metropolitan media area. So we were selling out in Chicago, sold out like 9 straight shows at the USC Pavilion. So they moved Starrcade to Chicago because it was going to be on pay-per-view. Well, as everybody knows, and I'm not going to try to answer a question by giving the entire 20 years past history of wrestling, Vince fucked Starrcade 87 by coming up with the Survivor Series and telling people, the cable companies, if you carry the NWA pay-per-view, you can't have WrestleMania. So everybody went back on their fucking promise except for 5 cable companies. So they went from doing 16,000 people in Atlanta and $300 and something thousand the year before, and 20,000 people and $380,000 in Greensboro the year before for the same show the same night. They sold out the Greensboro Coliseum in '86 and closed circuited the building next door. That's how big it was. So they went from a live gate of $600-something thousand and 2 sellouts plus closed circuit audience to a sellout in Chicago of $180,000 and 5 cable companies carrying a pay-per-view. And to be quite honest, our payoff for Starrcade 87 was the same as for Starrcade 86 because we had another scaffold match with the Rock and Roll Express that didn't go nearly as good as with the Road Warriors, not because of the scaffold matches or the shits. It wasn't Rock and Roll's fault. They had seen it. You shouldn't see another one for quite a while. We saw another one a year later. And the whole thing just fell in a fucking hole. Basically is what the problem was. So Chicago, a great town, but we didn't need to leave Greensboro and Atlanta for Chicago, for the big media market. Didn't work anyway. And that was the start of Vince fucking up the deal. So then that's what led to, against WrestleMania, the first TBS Clash of Champions live. And we took away some people from Vince and had the match where he made Sting the following March. And then the cable companies all got together and said, fuck you guys, you're costing us money, don't run against each other.
Mm-hmm. Greg Pike, did Animal really babysit Hawk over the years?
No, that Hawk had his issues, but I think actually if you want to phrase, Paul Ellering probably took care of both of them better than anything. So I can't really, I can't go.
Very good. Rich Eldridge, pro wrestling historian. He very proudly posts. Jim, how do you think Crockett and Dusty should have and could have handled Crockett purchasing UWF from Cowboy Bill Watts?
Well, it's much the same as the guest booker, the excellent guest booker with Jim Cornette DVD, which is available from kayfabecommentaries.com.
Is there anyone that doesn't own it yet? I can't imagine that being the case.
Actually, I think there's some Bolivian peasants that have yet to. Once again, there was some great talent there. The UWF territory had a problem because of the financial situation that led Watts to sell to Crockett in the first place. The oil bust in his core territory. He had tried to expand his syndication. But the talent was still excellent. Dr. Steve Williams, Terry Taylor, Ted DiBiase was still there. I believe that's when he took off and went up north. If they had been presented as equal threats to the Crockett guys, it would. But I'm more surprised that Dusty didn't go into a big invasion angle than I am that Vince didn't, because Vince is so fucking pompous. And everybody that works for him, they think that the only thing that's ever been done well in wrestling was done there, elsewise it didn't count. But Dusty knew a lot of these guys. He knew the territories. He knew the situation. I wasn't in the office then, so I don't know, but it surprised me.
Steve Jordan, while we're on wrestling historians, do you think the work that wrestling historians do to preserve history is worthwhile, or do you agree with Bruce Mitchell that real historians don't just stop with finding old newspaper clippings and match results?
Well, I never agree with Bruce Mitchell on anything, including the fact that he's still breathing. However, having said that, no, real historians don't just stop with finding old newspaper clippings and match results, but, nobody said that they did, or at least I haven't heard it. I think that, the book on the National Wrestling Alliance by Tim Hornbacher,
yes,
is one of my favorite books, because here's a guy from outside the business who did his homework and did his research, and drew a compelling picture of the way that organized wrestling was formed, and the way that the NWA was formed, and I think there are books like that out there, just like there are shitty books. So you got to find a guy that did his homework and got down and got the stories, and then other times people are, oh, here's a clipping from Oshkosh in 1956. Look, Crusher's in the main event. Well,
Yeah. Could you talk about Bruce Mitchell for another 20 minutes, please?
You skipped over Lyle Alzado. I saw that name. What?
It's the. Do you have any Ron Dixon writes? Do you have any memory stories or nightmares about learning the ropes? Do you remember it? We can refresh your memory here.
Well, no, I remember it.
Okay.
I remember it. Stan Lane was on that show. Are you going to show this clip?
I can't. That's why I skipped the question.
Yeah.
So it's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, my God. Well, take that off. No, what happened? It was Lyle Alzado played a school teacher who moonlighted as a wrestler, right? And they made a deal with Crockett to provide talent, and I guess it was on TBS. I guess I don't know, but anyway, some of the guys they would pick, and they never picked them. We didn't want to do it because they shot somewhere in fucking Canada. So on our day off, if we had a day off, either that or we'd be booked off of a show and we'd be sent all the way to fucking Canada to be in a sitcom, which at the time, we thought, well, this makes wrestling look phony, obviously. We don't want to be a part of that. I've always hated the idea of having television shows about wrestlers that show behind the scenes, because invariably they make the fucking business look phony. It was a lot more bigger deal there than it is now. Now here we are talking about it. But also the pay was like $500. And we were making more than that wrestling shows 90 miles from the fucking house, rather than going to Canada to expose the business in a fucking situation comedy that wasn't very fucking good. But they had Stan on it one time, and I don't even remember why, but we weren't asked and we weren't really missing it.
No problem. Courtney Marshall, do you think that Crockett was going out of business in 1988 when Arn and Tully left? Why did they leave in the first place?
Oh God, this would be a long one. We thought Crockett was going out of business more in March of '88 than we did in September of '88 when they left. Wrestling's a cycle, and houses were down the latter part of '87 and the first 3 or 4 or 5 months of '88. Business was rotten, and I detail in my book, Jim Cornette Midnight Express 25th.
Available at?
Book available at jimcornette.com. I tell what we were making, the matches, what they were drawing. But the point is, business was down, and we had no opponents. That's why we brought the Fantastics in. We begged Dusty, and he said, okay, we'll do it, to bring in Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers, because we had gone several months with no opponents. So anyway, then we had great matches in the ring, then we still had to worry about drawing money, and Dusty put a hell of an '88 Great American Bash together, and we went all across the country. The '88 Bashes were the most extensive tour they ever did, and we did big business that summer, and then shot the angle with Tully and Arn for the World Tag Team titles. So the double main event going around everywhere was Flair versus Luger. I'm going to rematch off the '88 Bash in Baltimore, and Tully and Arn versus the Midnight Express, match that never happened for the tag title. We actually did better houses in some of the cities than the Great American Bash did. We did 115 grand, I'm going to say, in Richmond, Virginia for the Bash, and came in September, did 140. Sold the place out. The houses had come up so much in these new matches that David and Jackie Crockett were trying to talk Jimmy out of selling to begin with. But it had gone too far, and it was already ready to go. And the reason why Tully and Arn left is because as they were doing due diligence to buy the company, TBS conducted supposedly confidential interviews where, well, what do you think ought to be done? And Tully, of course, being the fucking non-political motherfucker he was at the time, just knocked Dusty 15 ways from Sunday. And of course, TBS people immediately told Dusty. Dusty banned Tully off the fucking plane. Arn got hot. You know, Crockett's private plane, but the Jabroni jet and the Falcon jet was the real nice one. That's where the 9 top guys Jimmy Crockett flew on, right? Then the Jabroni jet, the Gulfstream with the propellers. That's where that was more fun because you had room to stand up. Anyway, Tully and Arn came in that night in Philadelphia and gave their notice that we're dropping the belts to the Midnight Express. That's why that match got such a fucking response, because the people saw us win the belts. And if you watch the tape back, which also the video is available at jimcornette.com, I got sources.
How'd you do
well,
that?
I had friends in the stands with camcorders. What can I say?
Good man.
A lot of the '86 title matches are there also. Go to jimcornette.com, you'll find out all about it. But anyway, the people popped, but then they thought, okay, it'll be a reverse decision. And when we actually left the ring with the belts, it started getting bigger. And that's what got us over in Philadelphia as baby faces, because they just, wow, it was something they weren't supposed to see.
Brad Dykins asks, do you ever have nightmares about the dynamic dudes?
Oh, gee, you know, Shane wasn't so bad, but that fucking left foot Laurinaitis, let me tell you something. Actually, the dudes didn't give me nightmares. We managed to forget the matches, but then somehow Laurinaitis came back in a reincarnation to inflict misery on the entire world of wrestling, and actually my bigger nightmares are about the shit that he did to Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville on the way to completely destroying and demolishing the WWE developmental program anywhere, and completely destroying their chances of finding, training, and fostering future talent. All goes on John Laurinaitis' back because he's a big lying sack of shit. Hi, John. Fuck you.
Adam Krasnoff of New Orleans, Louisiana asks, as despised as Jim Herd was, do you know of any good ribs that were pulled on?
Well, actually, no. You don't rib people unless you like them or unless it's some fucking annoying fuck that you really don't like and you can get away with it. He didn't fit either category because nobody liked him, but at the same point, he had a position of power. But when, I can't remember what the milestone was, but I was living in Knoxville because I remember making the phone call to 1-800-Flowers or whatever from my office downstairs. So it was in 92, right before he left. He was fixed to leave because he left in 92, so he was fixed to quit. And they reached some milestone where some house was so rotten, or some pay-per-view was nobody watched, or some rating was so minuscule that I just called up 1-800-Flowers and sent him a bouquet at the CNN Center in Atlanta, a bouquet of dead black roses with a card that said, "Our deepest sympathies on the death of your wrestling promotion, Jim Cornette and Stan Lane." Well, then Jim Ross, later on I talked to him, and he said what happened was they evidently delivered the flowers, and the card just said, "Jim, our deepest sympathies." They delivered the flowers to fucking Hurt, right? He came in, got hot, picked him up, carried him down the fucking hallway, and put him on Jim Ross's desk. Jim Ross comes in, sees him, reads the card. No, I would send him something like that. So then he figures out what happened. He picked him up and carried him back down to fucking Hurt and put him on Hurt's desk again. No, there were no good ribs with Hurt. He wasn't, he had no sense of humor. He had no sense. Nobody liked him. Nobody cared. They just, the way I wanted to give my resignation, because we knew we were going to quit WCW. We talked about, I fantasized about it in the car. I'd almost get a hard on. For the last year I was with WCW, I was booking Smoky Mountain Wrestling in my head. We talked about it. I talked with Bobby and Stan back and forth. And the original plan was to take the Midnight with me, but we thought we'd let the contract expire. We didn't know Stan and I were going to quit, and that whole story's detailed. But anyway, I want to give my notice this way. I said to Jim Hurt, I want to fucking walk in with a starter pistol, a blank gun, and kick his fucking door open and fire 5 shots at him. That's why I'm going to quit. And Bobby brought me back out of it because he said, "Corny, as many people as this guy has fucked around, he's probably got a real loaded one in his fucking top desk drawer." And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." But then for a brief moment, I thought maybe I'll just take a loaded one first because I wanted to, but I'd rather put my thumbs just in his eye sockets and just do it that way. I don't.
Well, you had a bulletproof vest from Louisiana. Slick Chris, Fall River, thoughts of Paul E. in WCW?
We had a ball. I still liked Heyman then. The guys even thought we hated each other. That didn't come till later. It was great to work with because everybody said, number one, you couldn't be a babyface manager. Well, so when people say never to me, I like to do that shit. So I can say, well, no, I did it. And I told Paulie one time, I said, "You're the only human being in the world could have turned me babyface. You could turn Genghis Khan fucking babyface. Nobody can like you." And at least I'd been there longer. So here comes this New York motherfucker. And I mean, I know I'm in a room full of Yankees, but people in Atlanta hate people from New York and probably vice versa. So here was this obnoxious, Yankee against the fuck. I may be a prick, but I was their prick. I'd been around a while. And so, the whole time we were in WCW together, it was great. Okay. Especially the infamous tuxedo match where Paulie wore those fucking baby blue with white little shorts and everything. But the only problem was when we had that match, the night before we were in Philly. And I jumped off the ring to avoid Terry Gordy throwing a table into the ring, and I fucking twisted my bad knee at the time, which this was the bad one. Now this is the bad one. So it's swollen up, and I'm thinking, oh fuck, we're limited enough as it is. I'm not a great wrestler or a great athlete, but I'm the only person in the world who can blow Paul Lee up because he's worse off than I am. And we got to be on pay-per-view, and now I've got a bad leg. So I said, hit with the phone, throw the powder in my face, and when I'm blind, work on my bad leg with the phone so that I can limp for the rest of the match, and then we'll work it in the match. If you go back and watch the tape, it's the 1990 Baltimore Great American Bash pay-per-view. You will see we've been sitting like this, right, across from each other for the previous hour talking about what we're going to do. And I'm saying, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. He immediately goes to work on the wrong knee. And you see me trying to pull him over in my other knee, and I'm pulling him, and I'm laying this leg out, and he's going back there, and I'm like, damn it. Finally, he just starts beating the fuck out of both of my fucking legs. It didn't come off anywhere nearly as bad as it should have, considering who was in it. I'll say that.
Greg Pike, biggest NWA/WCW payday.
Starrcade '86 was 10 grand. Starrcade '87 was 10 grand. Those were the biggest ones. I knew we were in trouble when WCW too. We were used to 5 grand for Starrcade '85. When basically the big show of the year, that was our payoff. Like I said, '87 didn't deserve it. I think they just were ashamed that they set us up on that scaffold for nothing. But when WCW took over and all of a sudden the pay-per-views got full coverage, all the cable systems, instead of just these closed circuit Starrcades, fuck, the biggest fucking check we got for a WCW pay-per-view was $3,000. We knew then we were in trouble. Of course, we were on guaranteed money and they were making none. But see, I looked at it like it wasn't our fucking fault the company ain't making any money, because it's not the fault of the wrestlers who were drawing sellouts in Richmond or wherever 2 months before they bought the company. It was the fault of the people running it, because in the book it is detailed. I won't even mention the book or where to get it. We went from doing record houses in some places in September of 1988. They bought the company in October of 1988. By February of 1989, Greensboro was down to fucking $12,000 gates. It just fell apart. Part of it was Tully and Arn. That took the emotion, took kind of the foundation. To break up the Horsemen took the foundation out of the NWA. But they hired people that had no fucking clue. They booked buildings on the wrong nights. They made the television show look like a fucking game show. The ding dongs, all the other things. It was an uphill battle for them.
Smoky Mountain, Tojo Boy, courtesy of Wrestling Classics. I
bet that's David.
Years.
I know David.
He's never answered this question for me. Back in '92, when Smoky Mountain was on Chattanooga TV, they never ran in Chattanooga, even though they did promos saying they were going to run a card there. I think Chattanooga would have given them another good, bigger city to hold semi-regular cards in Tennessee. Hey, Jim Williamson wants to know, why the hell didn't Smoky come to Chattanooga?
We tried, and actually I didn't even know I'd never answered this question for David. We wanted to clear television, and there was boy, this is going to be that long. Between 1987 and '88, when the territory started going out of business, and 1992, when we were doing this, those 4 years saw the influx of the infomercial, and also at the same time television was deregulated in large part by the FCC, because there used to be a limit on how much commercial time you can have on television and all this other thing, and it just bah. So whereas wrestling programs were great ratings getters, and that's what stations wanted in the 70s and 80s, by the early 90s, the television station didn't care about the ratings, because they had people, here's a tape and here's a check, just run it for a fucking hour. They didn't even need a sales force except to sell their 6 o'clock news fucking commercials. So that made it hard to clear television stations without paying for them, which Vince had set the precedent. We'll pay you, here's our tape. We went into the television station, the Fox station in Chattanooga, and said, if you will give us a time slot, we will run shows in Chattanooga, and we will buy schedules of advertising. We will figure there's a variety of ways you can do it. If the TV station wants to be a partner, you're great. If not, and you're fucked. And the station said, well, the only time we have right now is 1 a.m. Friday night, Saturday morning, after whatever the fuck Fox had on until 1 a.m. in the morning. But if we get good feedback, we'll find you a better time slot. So we're on there cutting promos. Hey, we're coming to Chattanooga. We're coming to Chattanooga. If you write in, tell the TV station you love us. No, they never came through. Then all of a sudden they would air us at 1 o'clock in the morning, but they wouldn't talk about, even for a little bit of money, putting something on in the daytime. And we're not going to try to run a city the size of Chattanooga with a TV show us on at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Fox station. And it just didn't work out.
Gotcha. Mike Campbell, 411mania.com. During the early stages of Smoky Mountain heavyweight title tournament, there was a spot in the tournament for Scott Anthony. Was this supposed to be the same Scott Anthony who was working in Global and eventually became Raven? If so, do you recall why he never wound up coming into Smoky Mountain?
Yes, it was supposed to be, and no, I don't. I don't remember. You know what?
You're speechless.
Was it? You know what? I think it was. God damn! I remember him calling me and saying I can't do something. Was it he was starting with ECW and going to do the Raven thing? What was the timing on that?
Year would have been for that?
Help me.
95.
Okay, then it wasn't that. Where did he go in 92?
He's still in WCW?
That may have been it. It may have been that because either I thought he was going to be available or he did or whatever.
When was he in New York?
He was
Flamingo.
Scotty
That was
Flamingo.
around about that time.
Was after that. He
That was
WCW.
before he
I
Yeah.
know that he was Scotty Flamingo.
Well, somewhere or another, and I mean, I'm not, fucking knocking Scotty. It's not like I was going to put the belt on him. And at the same, I mean, I wasn't. And at the same time, he had something else going on that would have been more advantageous for him. And so there was no heat and
Scheduling conflict. Mookie Gahan, courtesy of Figure 4 Online, how angry are you at Jericho for breaking his arm?
Okay, for those of you who don't know, I get a videotape in the mail, and normally I get these tapes, and it's a bad camcorder footage of a guy that has no tights and he weighs 140 pounds and he can't fucking wrestle and he's with another guy the same way. And I was in Smoky Mountain. I was trying to find some new guys, but at the same time, I just got disgusted with watching these tapes. So I popped one in. Just the only reason I popped it in was because it came from Canada, and he bothered to send it with a legible fucking cover letter. And so I pop it in, a guy I've never heard of, and I'm looking. I was like, Jesus Christ! His name was Lance Storm, and he was leaping to the top rope in one leap. But it wasn't just acrobatics for the sake of it. He had the size, he had the body. He had the look, he was young, he was wrestling, he was working, his shit looked good and acrobatic. And he's working with this blonde kid. Like, fuck, the blonde kid's as good as he is, Chris Jericho. And so I call up Lance Storm. I said, I would like you to come down here. And by the way, can you get a hold of the fucking guy you're working with? Yeah, we're a tag team. Sometimes. I said, well, great. I can't remember what name they used. And then the problem was, Lance was a Canadian citizen. Jericho had dual citizenship. So he could come, but Lance, we had to get paperwork done. I had to hire an immigration lawyer and all this stuff. But I had him come down, and it was great because when they came down for a Knoxville show, just to see the show and get familiar with the area, and that happened to be, I think, our Sunday Bloody Sunday show where we did a $30-something-thousand house, and Terry Funk was in, and there was like 5,000 people there, and they're going, oh shit, we've made it, right? So I made a deal with them, and they didn't understand the concept of gimmicks, selling gimmicks, merchandise, because the Rock and Roll Express may have been making $500 a week wrestling, but they were making $1,000 a week on fucking selling pictures of merchandise. So I'm looking at these two guys, they gotta be pussy magnets, right? The way they look, and they're young, and I said, you can make money on merch. Well, if we're gonna move from Canada, we want to get, so I ended up getting and Jericho says this in his book, but he acts like that they raped me and took advantage of me, and really it wasn't that bad. I got their gimmick money and gave them like a $750 a week guarantee or whatever, which wasn't that far out of the way, but I'm thinking these guys are going to sell fucking pictures out the ass. Well, and Lance, I love you. I love you. But Lance was bringing his wife to the matches to sell his gimmicks. And then the rats weren't, the only baby faces I've ever seen, the heels were getting more pussy than the baby faces. Because Jericho was picky, as he says in his book. My God, I guess he was waiting for Pamela Anderson to walk through. I mean, all the other guys, it was 8 to 80, blind, cripple, or crazy. If they can't walk, we'll drag them. But Jericho was picky, and Lance had his wife with him. So they weren't, the girls were not, they were not getting service, so they weren't buying the stuff. So I was taking a little bit of a bath, but if I can get these guys over, because I worked them with Well Done, Rex King and Steve Dahl, and they got over there, and then I had the Heavenly Bodies come back for a week for the big shows in August from the WWF to put the Thrill Seekers over, Storm and Jericho, and said the big match going to be Knoxville Civic Coliseum, the Night of the Legends, Heavenly Bodies and Thrill Seekers, this big angle we've built up, and we're going to be sold out, which we were. So that night, and I had told Jericho, I saw him take this fucking bump at a spot show in like Wartburg, Tennessee. Guy, he shoots a guy off in the corner, and he comes charging, and the guy moves, and he goes up over the turnbuckles and hits his head on the ring post and takes a bump straight to the floor. It looked like he killed himself. I immediately said, never take that bump again. Never do that again until I tell you to. Because it's going to be on a big show in Knoxville. It's going to be sold out. When you hit the post, you're going to get juice. The heels are going to beat the piss out of you. And that's going to be the turning point of the match. And then you're going to make a giant comeback, and it'll get you over. So never do that again in front of 300 people in fucking high school gym. Because you could kill yourself. So I've got that bump scheduled for that match, right? We're shooting interviews. At 4 o'clock that day, Jericho said, "You don't need me for interviews. Do you mind if I go out and work out in the ring?" I said, "Just don't hurt yourself." And off he goes. So we do the interviews. About an hour and a half later, Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, comes run up to me. "It's okay. Jericho's gone to the hospital, but he said he'll be back." I'm like, "Don't fuck with me, Brian. What the fuck?" No. We think he's broken his arm. Who broke his fucking arm? He did. What was he doing? Practicing a shooting star press. He broke his own arm. The building is sold out. He's in the co-main event that night with the Heavenly Bodies. He didn't need to do a shooting star press. The tickets were already sold. All he needed to do was get in the ring, have the match, and win. And now he's also, it's his right arm since his juice getting arms. So that whole fucking spot's out the window. And then he ended up getting juice with his fucking left hand, and either because it was left-handed or he wanted to make up for it, then he looked like he'd been run through a razor blade factory. He almost bled to death. He did. I've got to give him credit. He goes to the hospital. He gets the, not artificial, but those temporary casts put on. They said, "Oh, you need surgery." "Oh, I got to go wrestle." What? And he comes back, gets the juice, they win the fucking match, and then the next day he said, "Fuck it." And they had to put a pin in his arm and all that shit, and he's done. So now I got Lance Storm, one thrill seeker. He can only seek half the amount of thrills. And then I've got no tag team, and then, Jericho was out for months, and then I was afraid Lance was going to be mad at me. I said, "I can't keep paying you this single money because, blah, blah, blah." So we agreed Lance would go back home, and eventually they made it in wrestling, and I'm proud for him. But I may have been slightly mad at Chris that night.
I bet you were. An expletive or two may have fallen out of
Oh, God.
your holy mouth. Slick Chris, Fall River, once again, thoughts of Vince using Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch as Skip and Sonny, and then having Tom Pritchard as him.
A massive waste of talent, but I was resigned to it at that point because I saw, people being wasted. He had this idea that Chris somehow looked like the fucking Tony Little, those infomercials, the exercise guy, and Sonny looked like a fucking cheerleader, and the body Donnas, and here's this fucking young kid that is a main event talent, and this fucking cunt, and I say that with all the fucking love in the world for Tammy. She's a fucking bitch. She's a cunt. You can hate her. I've loved her since the moment I saw her because she, of all women that have ever been in this business, has the ability to be a heel. And you got these two that are young and already smart to the business, and the jumping jacks. Well, that was fucking stupid. And then Tom Pritchard, obviously after the Bodies, he needed a place to go, and they fucking shave his head and make him do that, and it was just stupid, and it fucking sucked. And here's Tom's a great worker, and Tom would never say fuck the WWF, so I'll say it for him. Fuck you, WWF, on behalf of what you did to Tom Pritchard.
Eric,
on a number of occasions.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee, and Jimmy Clow of Kentucky also asked, what was the real reason you closed Smoky Mountain down in late '95? Was it money, problems, burnout, combination of both? Different reason.
Well, no, if I had enough money, I'd still be there. 1995 was the year that Vince McMahon lost $6 million. It was the worst year of the 90s for the professional wrestling business. Nobody was drawing. That was when WCW Bischoff had just taken over. And remember, they did their first Nitro at the fucking Mall of America, for fuck's sake, like goddamn Tiffany or whoever she was. They were not drawing at all. Vince was losing money. We had gotten to the point where we were... seriously, a couple of grand a week would have been the difference between staying in business and not. But we'd gotten almost that close, and we started dropping again. And I'd lost the Bodies. And the Rock and Roll, who were a boon at the start, now they've been back together for 3 years. So you couldn't get any other new talent. Basically, we went into Thanksgiving weekend without going into the whole song and dance. We couldn't get the international distribution. Howard Brody, as a matter of fact, 6 months after we closed down, Howard Brody made me $75,000 for international television sales. Yeah, thank you, Howard, but I wish you'd been quicker. No. We went into Thanksgiving weekend, and I said, if we can do what we did last year, no better, no worse, then we can pay off our current fucking bills and et cetera, and then I'll go to Christmas and see what the fuck. And We did like $10,000 or $12,000 less for that Thanksgiving week. That's when Ricky Morton had a problem with his girlfriend having a fight with Tracy Smothers' girlfriend. They were supposed to work a program, just yada yada yada. I was getting burnt. I could have still kept doing it if the money was there, but basically Rick Rubin, who had backed us and been great through the whole thing, after 4 years. We were breaking even some. We were making a little money on some, losing a little money on some. But he thought we should have been self-sufficient. But we didn't realize in 1992 that we thought in 1992 the wrestling business is as bad as it's ever going to get. Holy shit, were we wrong? It got steadily worse. Smoky Mountain house shows were outdrawing some WCW house shows. If that tells you anything, it just people hated wrestling then. So at any rate, we did less, and I said, fuck it, I'm not going to get in a situation that other people got in later with ECW or whatever, where I owe people money I can't pay back. All the boys got all their money, paid the production company, got the fucking tapes, had a lot of my money in it as well. I'm not going to say a television station or two that had given it to us up the ass over a period of time might have got their last check or whatever, but the boys got paid and the production company that had worked with us got paid. And I just thought this is the time. And I'd gone to Vince, and because had been working up there. I said, Vince, we're probably closing up by the end of the year, and not going to have a place to get any talent from. And I didn't come out and say, will you help us? But that was I was leading it in that direction. And all he said was, well, if you need a job, pal, just call me, you got one. All right, thanks a lot. He didn't realize for about the next 2 or 3 years, oh fuck, now I got no place to get talent. That's why he started going to Memphis with Lawler, and then when I came up with the developmental program for OVW, but that was 5 years later or 4 years later, and he didn't realize how bad it was going to get yet with not being able to get any talent. So, blah, blah, blah.
Pony Player 19, courtesy WrestlingClasses.com. I always thought that Smoky Mountain might have worked at least a little better or for a little longer if you had a better lead baby face. Brian Lee, Tracy Smothers didn't cut it. Bob Armstrong didn't either. The high-quality tag team matches should have been the added attraction, not the main attraction. What they always lacked was a real star with real charisma that fit the old kayfabe territory theme of the promotion. So my question would be, who, in retrospect, do you think you could have gotten to fill that role? Who was out there that you could have afforded, that could have anchored the promotion and given you a chance? I asked this because I thought about it myself and can't think of anyone. I'm sure he's pondered it a lot more. Well, what about you, Pony Play? Where were you at the time?
Well, dumb shit. If you've thought about it and I've thought about it and we neither one came up with anybody, chances are that means there wasn't anybody. No, Brian Lee didn't cut it. And my original choice was Brad Armstrong. Because I thought Brad Armstrong looked like an athlete, could talk, could work, was a tremendous worker, was the smoothest worker of all the Armstrongs. And had never gotten a chance. But he wasn't available when we started in '92, and he was the one that I had thought when I'd book Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the backseat with the Midnight Express on those WCW trips, he was going to win the tournament. Couldn't get him. In the tournament was Brian Lee, Dirty White Boy was a heel then, Paul Orndorff, Ronnie Garvin, Dixie Dynamite was Scott Armstrong. There was 8 guys in the tournament. It was a one-night tournament. Anyway, Brad was going to win, couldn't get him. Brian Lee had been wrestling in Memphis, big tall kid, cut an okay promo, okay work. Brian's problem was he just couldn't. He was one of the guys, I've said it about other people, he had all the tools, couldn't read the manual. Just something about it never clicked with Brian. I like Brian and I have any problems with him. But he was the top babyface until then we were able to switch Tony Anthony, the Dirty White Boy, because he at least had a history in that territory. Then Tracy Smothers, I thought, did the best job overall because Tracy worked his ass off, had great matches, could talk, was legitimate for that territory, for that area of the country. People could identify with him, but at the same time, no, Tracy Smothers was not Jerry Lawler in Memphis, or was not Dusty Rhodes in Atlanta or Tampa or whatever. I tried Terry Taylor one time because they let Terry Taylor go from WCW, but he was still involved with the power plant because Eric Bischoff had said, oh, but you can still... I said, okay, if you've got anything to do with him, Terry, I love you. I think you should always have had a spot as a top babyface, but if you've got anything to do with Eric Bischoff and he sees that you're in any way successful for us, then he's going to fucking hire you back. So that didn't work. there was no top babyface to be had, and that was and Bob Armstrong. I just want to clarify this: Bob Armstrong was never the top babyface. Bob Armstrong, you always need a legend. You always need somebody that the people associate and remember from their childhood that can still get in and do it every once in a while. And with Bob, people forget we made him the commissioner. He wore a suit and tie, well, not a suit, but a tie, and a commissioner's baseball cap.
Yeah.
And because he could cut a hell of a promo, and you believed what Bob Armstrong said, and at 70 years old, which he is right now, he's still got bigger arms than anybody in this room, including me. Incredible shape. The fucking deal was Bob was a commissioner for a year, and then finally, because of the evil deeds of that no good stinking manager and his fucking men, especially what we'd done to his family, he was forced back into fucking wrestling, and he did it sparingly. And that drew, actually, the first biggest house, point is, I brought the Steiner brothers in to face Heavenly Bodies, and Knoxville did $8,000. I brought Big Boss Man Kevin Sullivan, a bunch of people, and we would get a little better. Arn Anderson, the Rock and Roll Express, etc. The biggest house to that point in time we ever did was Jim Cornette versus Bob Armstrong in the main event in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a lumberjack match with all the guys around the ring holding tennis rackets. And Bob basically said, Cornette, you put me in the hospital after the volunteer slam in May. You cracked my sternum with that racket, which I did. And he made sure to let me know about it. You handcuffed me to that cage, you cracked my sternum with the racket, you beat me up, and you had me carried out in an ambulance to the hospital. Well, I guarantee you, in that lumberjack match, I'm going to have you carted out to the same hospital that you sent me to, or I will refund the money of every man, woman, and child that buys a ticket to see that match. 3,500 people, almost $20,000. We doubled our previous best house in Knoxville. That's what got Knoxville started with the series of the August big shows that later on, next 2 years, sold out. It's not about having the greatest match. It's not about the greatest talent. It's about having something that people can believe in, that they want to see, and then presenting it in such a way that they know when they pay their money, they're going to be happy. And that's what we did. So Bob Armstrong, per match, per capita, drew more money and sold more tickets than anybody had ever wrestled in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee, do you happen to know or have an estimate on the number of original TV program content hours that you yourself have produced with your own companies? I don't know how the hell you would do this, but go ahead, take a stab at it.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling produced 200 shows, 198 of them aired. We also did some big events for videotape, but that doesn't count. With Ohio Valley Wrestling, it was right at 300 hours of weekly television because it started in July '99 and stopped in July of 2005. So what's 6 times 52, anybody? 312 or whatever the case. Yeah. Plus we did 4 2-hour primetime specials on the WB station. So 500 and then,
a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Sebastian, why did you sell Smoky Mountain Wrestling video library to WWE?
For 6 figures, that's why. To get my money back that I'd put into it. You know, it wasn't, I didn't consider, if I owned the classic Florida library, and I know Mike Graham had issues with this, or if I owned the Mid-South library, and that's still up in the air, or if I owned a library of classic wrestling that I knew that they would butcher and it would never be seen and they would fucking hide it and just show it and rewrite history, I don't know that I would have done it, but I didn't consider SMW, you know, the hardcore fans' dream treasure trove. It was, you know, it was a good show, but at the same time, I had 6 figures in it. I want to get 6 figures back out of it. And the same thing with Ohio Valley Wrestling. I know, you know, we sold it, and they didn't want to pay us, by the way. The fucking pricks apparently thought that they owned everything. Danny Davis had Ohio Valley Wrestling already going, already had a television show. And they thought from the time that they first sent down 6 trainees, 3 of whom could wrestle in front of people and 3 of whom had never even graduated class yet and couldn't even wrestle in front of people, they just assumed that they owned our television program because they're fucking obnoxious pricks. And by the way, if you ever think about doing business with the WWE and you're in the wrestling business, they will fuck you because they think that they're better than you are. So we finally had to argue with them because they would stop us from selling our show. No, you can't sell the show overseas for money because we own it. Show me where you own it. We had the fucking, well, it's our talent. Well, what about the non-contract referees, the non-contract wrestlers, the non-contract announcers, and the fact that we pay to produce and pay to air the fucking program? Fuck you. So they bought it from us. And you'll never see that either because, you know.
That leads to the next question.
Yeah.
Video from Jimmy James.
Good. They own it, so why does the WWE hardly use any of the SMW footage? Is it to get back at you? Do they just not see the value in it or what? I don't think they're getting back. I don't think they see value in it because it was great, you know, heated wrestling matches with Tracy Smothers and the Dirty White Boy and the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express. They use clips of people like Al Snow or Kane. Maybe they use Kane, I don't even know, because he was Unabomb, but a few of the people, and I think Jim Ross also did a lot to get them. They were buying libraries at that point, and JR said, hey, a lot of the guys started here. And I think, you know, so he was probably helpful in that, but I don't think it's anything. They would rather show the best of Chief J. Strongbow from 1973. All those classic fucking matches. Have I said fuck you WWE in the past 15 seconds? Because I'd like to again. It just feels so good running off my tongue. Fuck you WWE.
Mr. James E. Cornette,
Oh, golly.
James here from OffTheMarkShow.com. Take us back to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It was a great promotion, and the blood that guts the old school. It was kind of like the ECW of the South.
Well,
Why did it fold? I mean, it was immensely popular, and WWE owns the footage. They advertise it for it on 24/7 or Classics on Demand, whatever the fuck they call it now. Why don't they use that footage? Is there, you know, was there an argument with you when you left, or do they just not see the value in it?
we just answered this.
Yeah, I was waiting for the video to come up, and you read ahead.
Oh.
Most guys I have on the show can't read,
Shit,
so I
I'm
have
sorry.
the
I'm
advantage
sorry.
of
Well, you know.
Eric from Kingston, Tennessee. Over the last couple of years, I've been able to get all the old Smoky Mountain Wrestling TV shows on tape, as well as a lot of the house shows. Are there any plans for these shows to be remastered and made to the public on DVD?
Well, no, because I sold them to the
Right.
WWF and I don't want them to sue me. But at the same time, I encourage and admire all tape traders. Keep this stuff alive. That's why I have a huge collection of wrestling on video, and that's why I think that everybody, and that's the tape traders before the internet and before commercial releases. I would tape the show in Louisville and I'd send it to the guy in Atlanta who taped the Georgia show, or the guy in Detroit who taped the, you know, whatever, from 79 through the early mid 80s there. That's the way that all this stuff was kept alive. That's why so much wrestling is available from 79 on, but so little because that was the VCR, you know. And I know it's hard for people now, young people, to understand. When we, who had 4 television stations in our town, suddenly had a box that we could actually pick up and carry that would videotape television so that we could watch it later, and it only cost $1,000. My God, that was revolutionary. And then you had a wireless pause control, or a wired pause control, where you stuck the fucking thing in and you could go pause, unpause. Fucking brilliant.
All right, Stump Cornette. You sent in your questions. We grabbed a handful of them that we thought were worthy, and if you stump them, you get the DVD for free. All right, firstly from Mike Campbell, 411 Mania. We tried to use the fair questions. There was some nonsense, but let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, the question is, who was the first person to win all 3 titles in ECW?
I don't have a first fucking clue. What would I know that?
Well, you're a wrestling historian, aren't you?
Yeah, but that's not wrestling history. That's modern shit.
Bruce Mitchell would know.
It's only history if you're fucking 12 years old.
Bruce Mitchell would know.
Bruce Mitchell knows a lot of things. Some of them I don't want to know.
Okay, so the
I couldn't name you 3 ECW champions. Taz, Raven. Am I getting anywhere?
No.
I ain't hitting any. Is this cash cab?
The answer is Johnny Hotbody.
Wow.
It's true.
Okay.
All right, a question from Kevin Barrett. Besides being the first main event of the first wrestling pay-per-view, the match between Harley Race and Ric Flair had another first to it. What was it?
Wait a minute. Match between Harley Race and Ric Flair was not on the first wrestling pay-per-view.
Oh, Starrcade 83, right?
That was not on pay-per-view. Starrcade 83
Well,
was
it
on
was,
the
it was a
circuit. The
closed
first
circuit,
wrestling
right.
pay-per-view was that Wrestling Classic deal that Vince did in '85 as a trial.
Yeah. Right, and that, yeah. Okay,
So
but that was
basically,
a
I've
closer-
just blown your fucking question.
It's
All right.
invalidated. The question's been invalidated by the main.
Okay, but what's the question again now?
Okay, well, the Harley Race and Ric Flair match, there was a significant first in wrestling history, other than...
For Starrcade 83.
Yeah.
Flair for the gold. That was the significant first.
A hint for you, you would have seen it happen 3 other times.
Well, then how could it be a fucking first?
That was the first, but it has happened 3 times since.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
And the NWA World Title changed hands in a steel cage.
Oh, well, for fuck's sake.
Don't get all Russo on me. It's not his fault. He got you. All right.
Well, that question's invalidated anyway.
Jorge. When Tatanka debuted, he went on to his Goldberg...
Can somebody give me a question from the 70s that I'd know the answer to? All right, no, go ahead with Tatanka.
When Tatanka debuted, he went on his Goldberg-esque winning streak. Who handed him his first loss?
When did Tatanka, what year anybody did Tatanka debut?
93?
Okay, I'm in fucking Knoxville working 20 hours a fucking day booking wrestling. I didn't have time to watch the fucking WWF. I didn't even watch the shows I appeared on.
Ludwig Borga.
Oh, geez, there you go.
Jay Zaretsky from Ontario,
Who wouldn't have
Canada.
known that?
You're breaking me. I had to give away 3 discs already. Jay Zaretsky, Ontario, Canada. Which wrestler tried to work an angle tastelessly recreating the Bruiser Brody murder, but was given so much
Onita.
negative... Okay, very good.
Jesus.
Very good. Jorge asked another one.
Jorge again.
Well, you got him the first time. Let's see. Only 2 masked wrestlers have ever held the AWA heavyweight title. Who are they?
Was he Dr. X
Yes,
at that
sir.
time? And the Destroyer. No, Destroyer was WWA. Wait a minute, masked wrestlers holding the title. Is that the masked Mr. M?
Yes,
Bill Miller?
sir,
Yes,
both of
okay.
them.
See, and older stuff, I started to say antique, but older stuff, you know, I can...
Okay, and prior to Rocky Maivia, what 2 American non-indie wrestlers used The Rock as a prefix to their name?
Well, Ole Anderson's
Yes,
nickname
sir,
was
that's one.
The Rock, although he actually didn't use that professionally. But you're also talking about Rock Riddle, or just a prefix instead of a...
Yeah, not part of the name.
So I like Rock Riddle. I just wanted to mention his name. Don Morocco.
Correct.
Yeah.
You got them both.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to do
And,
the
and Rock Riddle extra credit for not knowing fucking Tatanka's fucking business. She asked me goddamn Cowboy Lang's social security number.
Set up the board
Why
for
are
me
you
real quick.
rushing through me?
Wait, he's just leaving.
I'm
He just-
nervous. He's going to get divorced. I got to get him to his dinner.
During the segment.
ECW. Mike Giuliano, how did the heat between you and Paul Heyman begin, and how much of it was a work?
God, we could be here for a while. You know, the thing is, and I can't say that I hate Paul Heyman personally. It's nothing like Vince Russo. I would kiss Paul Heyman on the face before I would fucking be in the same room right now with Vince Russo. But and I mean, Paulie's always had his little tricks. Like, you know, when I quit WCW, he'd call me at my house in Charlotte every month or so, you know, on the pretext of, you know, how are you doing or whatever. But actually, you got them right where you want them. They'll give you anything to come back. Paul, I'm not coming back. I don't like those people that want to work for him. Got them right where you want them. Just keep it up like that. Either he thought everything was always a work, because in his mind it is, or elsewise he was checking to see. One time he even put his arm around me like this, started walking me to the door. If I were you, I wouldn't take this. He wanted to get me out of there. But the thing started with me and Paul with the Gangstas thing, where I'd had the Gangstas for a year, and you know, I came up with the gimmick when I saw them working in Atlanta for Sammy Kent and the little, you know, local promotion there, and I thought, this New Jack can talk, and Mustafa looks great. It worked on both of them. They were still real green, but you know, it was topical, the Rodney King beating. So I thought, let's take this black tag team, supposedly from South Central LA to the fucking hills of Tennessee, and they got to get some heat. They did. Unfortunately, lesson learned as a booker, it was the wrong kind of heat. But in the process, I mean, and plus, they once, one of our local ring announcers once announced them from South Central Louisiana. They didn't even, they weren't even watching the news, right? They didn't. And Mustafa Saeed became Mustafa Said, But anyway, and I've told this story before, but I'll try to make it brief. They've been there for almost a year, and I gave them a 3-month notice. I said, guys, you've wrestled everybody. I ain't got nothing else to do. We're losing spot shows because, to be quite honest, a lot of the local fire departments, it wasn't they wanted to see these heels get the shit kicked out of them. They just didn't want to see these heels. They didn't want to have them in their fucking town. And somehow I became a racist because the volunteer fire department in Paintsville didn't want black guys in their fucking gym. I don't know. But anyway, so I tried Memphis. And Randy Hales wouldn't touch him because Randy's, a lot more conservative than I am, and he didn't want to do that. And of course the WWE, no, we ain't gonna, we've heard that New Jack talk, we ain't gonna do that. I said, they're tailor-made for ECW. And I hadn't talked to my old friend Paul in a couple of years. So I called Paul trying to get him a spot in ECW, but at the same time, New Jack had evidently called and either talked to him or Todd Gordon. So the story I'm getting from Paul is, yeah, we'd like to have him. And I said, look, I'm finishing him up on July 15th or whatever it is. And I said, we can shoot something on tape. We can do an angle, or I said, whatever the fuck you need. I want to get these guys a spot because they work for me. Well, at the same time, New Jack comes and says, well, Todd Gordon said he talked to Paulie, and if we didn't start on July 1st or whatever it was, and then we ain't never going to start. I said, well, it's not the story I got from Paul, because I said I needed you guys to finish up these big towns. You've beat everybody. Now's your time. Once on the way out, wasn't going to beat them into powder, to put Tracy Smothers and Tony Anthony over and blah, blah, blah. So I called Paul back. And I said, Paul, I'm getting conflicting shit here. I said, New Jack's saying that if they don't start July the 1st, then they'll never start. And you said I could have them until the 15th, and then they can start up there. They must honor your dates. They must honor your commitments. I won't use them. I will not use them one time if they don't make all the dates that you book them for. I said, well, that's all I need to know, Paul. Right as I'm hanging up, he says, let me know if you fire them. Okay. Huh? Let me know if you fire them. Well, of course I fired them when they stopped showing up. They went and made the fucking date that they've been saying they were going to make for Paul, and didn't make the last 2 weeks of my dates, and Paul lied to me, and then of course I couldn't get him on the phone after that. And basically, I thought, okay, he's fucking with me. And that's also where the story came in that I owed the gangsters money, because everybody got paid on the last day of the weekend, right? So in this case, it was a Monday television taping. On Saturday night in Johnson City, Mustafa had not showed up, but New Jack was there. And New Jack said something about, car trouble or what. I don't know what the story was. But also, several people, including my ex-wife, heard New Jack say, well, this is the last time I'm going to be here because we're going to ECW. So Monday was television, Sunday was day off, so Monday everybody's going to get paid. So somewhere the gangsters took draws in cash every night anyway, so it wasn't no big amount of money. I owed each of them $100 for Saturday night or whatever, right? I owed New Jack $100. I owed Mustafa $100 for Friday night, whatever the fuck it was. The point is, I wrote him out of TV on Monday. And then New Jack shows up, still no Mustafa, and I would have figured it'd been the other way around if I was a betting man. I said, New Jack, why are you here? He said, well, I'm booked. I said, well, you ain't booked anymore because you told several people, including my wife, that you weren't going to be here. Oh, I didn't say that. I said, well, look, Jack, just be honest. If she says that you squat down in the parking lot and shit a live chicken, I'm going to believe her rather than believe you, so I wrote you out, but here's your pay for Saturday night. And no, as a matter of fact, I paid him for coming to TV $100. And Mustafa, I didn't give him Mustafa's money. I said, if Mustafa ever wants to fucking come get this fucking $100, he can come, right? That's the last time I ever saw him until they walked in on me in the deal, But then New Jack started cutting promos on me on ECW television. And I was hot at him because I gave him a chance. I put him in the ring with The Undertaker. I put him in the ring with a lot of top guys. I gave him the biggest payoffs that they'd ever had in the business. More than $100 a night for the big shows. But at the same time, I was hot at Paul E because why is he working this fucking angle ECW and Smoky Mountain are never going to have anything going on because it wouldn't fucking work. We're not going to do an invasion angle, nor are they coming down here. 2 different styles, 2 different territories. What the fuck? Why? It just, Paulie was getting jollies from letting a guy knock me. So that was the start of, and then I worked with Paul. When they were punishing him, when he was in the WWE in 2005, they sent him down to Louisville to go to OVW because they knew that was punishment for him because he'd rather be in New York. Whereas the punishment for me was the opposite way around. I wanted to be in Louisville instead of New York, so they were fucking with me in that way, but they were fucking with him. So we commiserated on that. But the problem is Paul is a pathological liar, and I said at the time he'd rather climb a tree and tell a lie and stand on the ground and tell the truth. And he hated that, but it's true. Candido and Tammy went in a hole financially on his say-so. A lot of guys did. He fucked up a lot of people's lives with not just telling them the truth. There's the famous Bubba Ray Dudley story about the FedEx. Bubba is promoting one of the New York towns because Bubba's from New York for ECW, and he needs like out of posters, tickets, promotional material, or whatever. He calls Paul. Paul, where is this shit? Oh, I got the FedEx tracking number right here. It's 472-654-651. Bubba says, Paul, that's one too many numbers. I'll just knock the last one off. No, and he stood, Brian Hildebrand, desperately, Mark Curtis, who I can't say a bad thing for him, and knew him for 20 years. Everybody loved Brian. He wanted to referee for ECW. That's before he got, after Smoky Mountain closed, before he got the WCW spot, because all the guys liked him so much. He actually was promised a date, and his plane ticket never showed up. So he called Paul. Paul said, oh, it'll be at the airport. He drove from Morristown 50 miles to the fucking Knoxville airport. No ticket. Call Paul. Wait, just call me right back. He calls him back in 10 minutes. Answer machine. Never could get him again. Never could get him again. Standing there. You know, he stood Brian up. Just did a lot of shit like that. Just tell the people the truth, Paul. Just once. That's all. We would have never had these issues. But now one of these days, you and me, on pay-per-view, it'd be a big, I might even work with you. I wouldn't work with Russo, but I'll work with Paul. Maybe.
Justin and Erica have a lot to say. We respect the hell out of you. You're one of the greatest minds in wrestling, no question about it. There's something we don't quite understand, though. It's your view on ECW. We've seen several shoot interviews which you generalize the promotions being blood, ladders, tables, fire, little to no substance. Please feel free to correct us if we're wrong. We find that to be an unfair assessment, though, because ECW was so much more than that. Apart from late 80s NWA programming, we're hard-pressed to think of a wrestling program that was as consistently entertaining as hardcore TV was. And the fact of the matter is that ECW was so much more than tables and barbed wire. Shane Douglas, Taz, RVD, Eliminators, Sabu, Raven, Cactus Jack, Tommy Dreamer, Paul E's brilliant booking, all these things combined to make ECW great, to make ECW matter. There were plenty of matches had at the ECW arena that did not involve tables, fire, chairs, foreign objects from the crowd, you know. You might want to write it off or call it a cult attraction, which you have done, but it was much more than that. Please help us understand.
Don't move it. Don't move it. I want to refer to it. I never said it was a cult attraction. I said it was a cult following. And Paulie, I mean, you know, everybody in the business says, well, we're gonna drink Heyman's Kool-Aid. He was a cult leader because he was a great motivator, but he would motivate the guys that worked for him to do these things to their bodies and to their pocketbooks that nobody else could motivate them to do. But let's go back to the start. There was Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and great wrestlers, and there were great wrestling matches. Yes, I'll admit that. The problem I had was with ECW. I get, you know, everybody said, well, you did street fight matches in Smoky Mountain. Yeah, but here's the thing. You can have a match that becomes a fight and spills out of the ring and people are being thrown into shit or hit with chairs or whatever, and then you can have a stunt show. And it got so far. It was like hot shotting on a weekly basis. How can we top ourselves? How can we top ourselves? They had a scaffold match, but it wasn't enough for the guy to take a bump off a scaffold. He had to take a bump off a scaffold through 3 tables, possibly that were set on fire. I can't remember. They set people on. They set Terry Funk on fucking fire. The barbed wire. I'm seeing Mick Foley. I respect Mick, and you know, he's wrapped up in barbed wire, and people are bleeding out the ass. It's bad for the business. You can't follow it. You as ECW found out. I could have run Smoky Mountain Wrestling for the 4 years that it was in existence. done the same things, the same television shows, with the same cards, with the same talent, and never charged a single penny for admission, and still would not have owed as much money as ECW did when it went out of business. It's not just a blood, ladders, tables, fire, and little to no substance. There was substance there. I've always said Paulie's a genius at getting the most out of the least. He was a good booker. He had a mind for the business. He could cut a promo. He was a good manager, etc. But he had this little problem with the truth and with restraint, like many people from New York. Russo. I haven't mentioned that name. I guess I will later.
We're so gonna get there.
But the problem is, it becomes a stunt show, and it becomes something. It was contrived. It was choreographed. I'll never forget. I didn't watch a lot of ECW TV. I was up there in Connecticut for a lot of it. I didn't want to watch the WWF TV. But I watched one night, and there's these two guys. I can't remember who it was. There's a table set up in the middle of the ring. They get up on the top turnbuckle, and they're both standing there holding on to each other, and they're punching each other while they're on the top turnbuckle, and there's the table, and I don't even think thumbtacks had come in yet, thank God. But they got each other, and all of a sudden you see them look at each other, look down, and go like, okay, here we go. And they both jump off together. It wasn't real. Instead of a fight that was erupting and evolving into a Pier 6 Donnybrook with people getting hit by furniture, instead of hitting people with furniture, they were hitting furniture with people. People knew that there was cooperation involved. They went too far. You can't follow it. After you go through the table on fire, then the table on fire needs to have thumbtacks on it. Then there needs to be AIDS-infested hypodermic needles on the mat below it. And then they got to bring in the pit bulls that haven't been fed in 4 days. Where do you fucking stop? That's what's the problem with the wrestling business now. In a nutshell, 20 years ago, we didn't hurt each other, but people thought we did. Now we hurt each other, but people don't believe it. ECW, in my opinion, was a large part of helping that come about.
TJ from Australia, your thoughts on what WWE did to ECW, or better yet, WWECW?
Oh, wait a minute. I like your... It's been well documented that you're not a big fan of one Paulie Dangerously. The E is for extreme, folks. Or as you may know him on a personal basis, Paul Heyman. While it is known that you two have a, how should I put this, personal hatred for one another, you must at least find something Paulie did as a booker to be at least warranting of your praises. So tell us, King of the Dairy Queen. What would you say is your favorite angle conceived by Mr. Heyman during his reign as booker of the original ECW?
I thought we'd cover it a little bit.
You know, but no, I want, because and I wasn't a religious watcher of ECW. I did see some of the TVs, but I don't think that any one particular angle was Paulie's shining moment as much as the fact that Public Enemy. I mean, let's face it. They didn't get over anywhere else because they weren't allowed to do their shit. Paulie let them do their shit. Paulie could find something about anybody. And the Eliminators, not the most polished workers, but great athletes. You could go on and on and on. Paulie got people over that other people couldn't get over, that people couldn't get over in other places. So I think it's what he did with the talent, or bringing in and exposing people to the Eddie Guerreros and the Chris Benoits and etc. before they were on the mainstream promotions. That was, to me, Paul's best contribution to ECW, but I just wish the hardcore stuff is what everybody wanted, and what everybody went nuts over. But once again, sooner or later, you hot shot long enough. This is what Russo doesn't understand, and I'll talk more about him later. But Russo does not understand that every period of hot shotting in the business is followed by an equally long, if not longer, period of drought, because you can't follow it. In the old days, when territories were down, business was down, the booker, okay, we got a hot shot. We're going to have some blood. We're going to bring the Sheik in. We're going to have an angle. We're going to have a heavy stipulation. We're going to have something. We're going to throw it all at them, get them back, and then get them hooked to what we're doing, and then gear it back before we can't follow it. Now, nobody gears back. Pedal the metal every fucking week, which is why now people are just immune to this constant parade of violence and yelling and screaming. Whereas with TNA, I used to say it was... There were women fighting in the women's room, then we cut to the fucking back where somebody's getting thrown into one of the fucking locker room trailers, then we cut to the arena where people are already fighting. It's just endless fucking sound and motion. It means nothing. You can't follow this shit. A little restraint, just a tad. Make it real, don't make it goofy.
Well, what are your thoughts on what WWE's done to it since taking it over?
They didn't take it over, they used the initials. I mean, the WWE's version of ECW makes the original ECW look good to me. At least there was some passion and emotion there and some effort, and the guys were trying. WWE, ECW, Vince never understood it. You know, Vince does not see these things. Vince McMahon, and if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet ain't left the ground, never watches any other wrestling. When the Rock and Roll Express came up to do the Survivor Series pay-per-view, he asked me, now which one's Ricky and which one's Robert? Only the hottest babyface team that his competitors had ever had on national television for years and years. He didn't watch it. I sat with him while he watched the first clip of ECW that he had ever seen after they were already working together. Because, and truthfully, I said, do you want to fucking watch this? And it was Bill Alfonso and Beulah, where Alfonso's bleeding like crazy and they're pile driving women. I said, what the fuck? What? Oh, didn't know they did things like that. He never watched WCW. He never watched Nitro. He never, no, his stooges and various people. But no, Vince McMahon to this day, I would imagine he hadn't seen as much wrestling non-WWE as we've seen in the last 2 days.
OVW. Mookie Ghana of F4W Online. When Kenny Bolin was getting lauded as one of the best non-wrestlers of the half-decade, 4 years on the list as of 2005. Is there any talk of bringing him up to WWE?
Absolutely none whatsoever. They didn't watch the OVW TV show when we were working with them, developing their talent. And finally, as a putative measure, they made Bruce Pritchard start watching the fucking show. The fucking comedy writers, they had never even watched fucking OVW. We sent a tape, but they never watched it. No, they don't understand why Kenny gets over. Kenny is classic pro wrestling. His entire life is a pro wrestling promo. And he is a classic, he's a cross between Mr. Haney on Green Acres, Uncle Joe on Petticoat Junction, and fucking Chill Wills, Andy Devine, and the great wrestling stars of days gone by. And no, a manager that can cut a promo and fucking make people hate him instantly, or talk people into doing anything he wants, whether they've ever heard of him or not, they have no place for something like that.
Mark O'Connell.
More lingerie models.
Mark O'Connell says, channeling Dusty Rhodes, cut a promo on Kenny.
Oh my God. Kenny Bolin, you couldn't put me down with a steel-toed boot. Couldn't put me out with a steel-toed boot, but I promise you, unless you get me dinner for free at Applebee's, payback will be hell, Daddy.
Mike Campbell from 411 Me. How do you respond to the comments that Batista made in his book saying he wasn't taught anything in OVW?
Well, I got news for you. You didn't learn anything in OVW, but it wasn't for lack of trying. We tried to beat it into your fucking head. Batista said that because he wanted to buddy. If you noticed, every time somebody buddies up to Helmsley, they get the title. We pushed Batista to the moon. The first time I saw Dave Batista, he could not sell a punch. Alpha had taught him how to write a check. He immediately in training tore his bicep because he was so fucking steroided up, and he was off on the sidelines for 3 months, and he got a chance to sit and watch class, and then he was better. And he had an amazing look. He was a good natural athlete. He was a very frail demon. He was always sitting there with his sweatshirt on, and he was always very cold and always very chilly. And you should have seen when we brought him up, rose him out of the Ohio River. Oh my God, he was down there going, oh my God, snakes and shit. And he did whatever his wife said for him to do, and he was just a pussy-whipped, fucking frail, fucking quiet demon. But Leviathan, the demon of the deep, the guardian of the gates of hell, the right hand of Satan himself, was the most physically dominant force that had ever been in the promotion, and we smashed him over. He beat everybody. He did no jobs. He beat 2 guys and 3 guys at a time. We made him so... our version of The Undertaker, because that's what I was going for. I was going for The Undertaker's next money pay-per-view opponent, because look at the guy. He can't take arm drags in the second match. He's either got to be main event or nothing. So I was shooting for a gimmick that he could, with his limited ability, to be quite honest, that he could perform, that could get over, and it did. And I put him in the ring with Kane, and he's sitting there. I said, tell Glenn what you do. Well, anything you want to do. He just had no oomph to him. Put him in a ring with The Undertaker for the first time in Louisville. All these things drew. Put him in a ring with Big Show. All these things drew money. They sold tickets. He was an attraction, but he was never driven to be a success. He'd like, oh, I'm sick today or whatever the fuck. So anyway, finally, They take him up there, they put him in a suit and put the box around his neck for Devon, right? You remember that? And they're about ready to fire him, and somehow he starts working out with Helmsley, and all of a sudden he's a top guy. And then all of a sudden he writes a book, he didn't learn anything in OVW. Well, it wasn't for lack of trying. I called him on the phone, I said, Dave Batista, left a message on his voicemail. I said, I'd like you to call me back and tell me why you say you didn't learn anything. When we took care of you, we liked you, we smashed you over, we did everything we could possibly do for you, and then you come and knock me and Danny Davis. I said, I'd like you to call me and tell me why. In the meantime, fuck you. And I've never heard a goddamn word from him since, and don't really give a fuck whether I ever do.
Let's see with the one Adam K.
Jim Cornette, it's the one Adam K here, and I'm representing the Who Dat Nation. And I want to get your thoughts on Nick Dinsmore. You trained Nick Dinsmore, and what was your impression on the Eugene character? Did you think it had a lot of longevity, or do you think that something like this was going to get a big backlash from a lot of activist groups?
No, I didn't think it was going to get any backlash from activist groups. I thought it was going to end his career, and it pretty much did. I love Nick Dinsmore. When I first went to OVW, he was the standout guy there. He, Doug Basham, Rob Conway, and Danny Basham, Danny Holly, the Damage Up, were Danny Davis's 4 core original students, the guys that he had built his promotion around, and they were all talented, and I used them in various positions over 4 or 5 years, and Nick was great. He wasn't the greatest promo in the world, but he could get the job done after a while. He looked good, looked like an athlete, he could teach wrestling or perform wrestling. I brought Chris Benoit down. They went 20 minutes at the Louisville Gardens, tore the house down. They wouldn't look at him. I fucking put him in a program with Doug Basham. Here we're drawing money, especially in the summer at the Six Flags shows, we're drawing money in a wrestling school with these guys on top. They wouldn't look at him. I said, why the fuck can we not get Nick Dinsmore up to the main roster and make him some money? He just doesn't have anything, he's too plain. One time I rated number 1 through number 20, who should go to the main roster, who is ready to graduate. And there's Dinsmore at number 1, and they took number 17, 18, and 19. I think it was Orlando Jordan, Mark Jindrak, and who the fuck else, who knows. So what else to fucking do? And then all of a sudden, he's up there as Eugene. I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but he's a retard. Roughhouse Fargo was my favorite wrestler when I was 9 years old, but he only came in at Christmas time. And then he went back and refereed to Sonny Fargo for the Crockett's, and you waited for 6 months or a year for Roughhouse Fargo to come back and sell out. You can't have a retard on television every week as a babyface, especially when he accidentally got over. They didn't want him to get over, but he got over because he started outsmarting the fucking heels, and people like a retard that outsmarts the heels because that makes them look even stupider. But then when they start fucking outsmarting him, what does that take? Because he can't even spell his own fucking name. Short-term shelf life, and now he's pigeonholed as Eugene. I'd love to have Nick in Ring of Honor, but I can't with a straight face bring that up because the stink of Eugene is still on Nick Dinsmore, who could have been the next version of a Chris Benoit or a great professional worker like that, and instead they gave him a career-killing gimmick like they've done so many other guys, and the Spirit Squad, half those guys quit the business. Johnny Jeter moved from San Diego to Louisville, 3,000 miles, everything he owned in the trunk of his car when he was 19 years old. Waited tables at Chili's to pay for his wrestling school tuition. Becomes way farther advanced than anybody should have been at his age. Becomes a Ricky Morton for the 21st century, in shape, with fire and can sell. And by the time they finish with him, he's up there for a year and a half, he goes home, quits the business. They run more people out of the fucking business. And now, once again, the question, Nick Dinsmore, no. It finished his career. Everybody will look at him as Eugene, and nobody wants that in their promotion if they want to be serious.
El Matador, Figure 4 Online, was there a specific point in the OVW-WWE relationship where you realized that everything was fucked and wasn't going to work?
Well, where I should have realized, as soon as Jim Ross retired from the job as Vice President of Talent Relations and tagged off, handed it to John Laurinaitis. Talk about fucking going down the home stretch and fumbling the baton. I should have known then, but I didn't realize right then because I didn't know anybody could be as incompetent and as deceitful and as totally disregarding of anybody else's business as John Laurinaitis turned out to be. But once they started pulling people that were promised to us and firing people out from under us, we'd have champions, guys holding belts. they would fire them and then call us and tell us about it. And then they'd also have told those guys, don't go back to work for insurance reasons. Or, you know, call me on Tuesday, use this guy on TV. TV when? TV tomorrow. TV tomorrow's written. Well, use him anyway. Well, fuck you. I don't have 15 secretaries. I have to do this shit myself. We had TV written 3 days ago, like you ought to. It just lying about guys that were promised that weren't coming, not wanting us to do business. I could go on and on. That could be a whole nother videotape. But John Laurinaitis, the guy who signed the wrong one-legged man, the guy who basically has plummeted the developmental program into the sewer, the guy who is a laughingstock as far as a talent relations administrator, who is there because Stephanie likes him, because he says yes to anything related to Stephanie. Yeah, that was the beginning and the end of the OVW-WWE relationship.
All right, it's time for a game. It's the shit list, the Jim Cornette shit list. I'm gonna go through names.
That was a great song, by the way. Pillman used the song Shit List in ECW. I do know that much.
Was it a country song?
No, you've never heard that? You made my shit list. Yeah,
No.
Yeah, it's all right anyway. Somebody knows it, I'm sure.
You got it? Okay. So I'm going to present you with a name. If they're on the shit list, they go on the board. If not, I'll toss it aside if they're irrelevant. Then once we get the handful of names here, you can rank them 1 through 5.
Okay.
You have a very lengthy shit list. You claim last time we were together that it's gotten shorter. I doubt that after the last 4.5 hours
Well,
together.
people might be shitty with me, but I don't really care about some people anymore. I just decided as I get older, I'm not going to tolerate bullshit, and I'm going to say what I fucking think, because fuck it.
Certainly we can get 5 names, but let's fill this side here. Vince McMahon.
Well, he'd be on it.
He'd be on the shit list.
Vince McMahon never did anything to me personally. It's just all the minions and stooges that he hired that did perpetrate shit, and he allowed them to get away with it.
Well, that qualifies.
Therefore,
Eric Bischoff.
I'm really ambivalent about Bischoff one way or the other.
Very good.
You know.
Very good. Mark Madden.
Well, we'll put him over here because I'm not sure if he's 2 or 3.
Okay. That didn't take long. Wade Keller.
Let's put him on standby.
Because we're not sure if we're going to use him.
I'm not even sure now if he makes the top 5.
Okay. Hardcore wrestling.
Well, now that's not really a person or a place. It's more of a thing. Okay, well,
that's on the shit list, though.
Let's stick it up there on standby. Stick it up there on standby. This thing's gonna fall over pretty soon. Spared no expense on this fucking set here.
You got to see our budget. New York.
Oh no, you know, no. With all these other competition, I still don't understand the traffic or the smog or the fact that the pedestrians won't get the fuck out of the way of a moving car. But nah, just
Really? Wow. That one is shocking to me. I thought that would have had the top spot. Dairy Queen.
I love Dairy Queen. Now, if you made it Dairy Queen in Hyden, Kentucky, after a really lousy spot show with a rude window person, but otherwise, I'm a Dairy Queen fan. Oh, you got to stick him over there. Yeah, you got to stick him over there. God, this
You notice I'm leaving a lot of room because I figure we're gonna. Okay, Bubba the Love Sponge.
Actually, no, I want to put him on my hit list because after he played part of my Who Slammin' Who podcast on his satellite radio show, not only did he not refute any of the points I made about how shitty he and the TNA show was, but also I got 30,000 more hits and set a record downloads the following week. So actually, I need to send Bubba a Christmas card.
Okay.
Yeah, I went over 100,000 for the first time.
Joey Styles.
You know, once again, Styles' momentary fucking pain in the ass during the middle of the election when we're trying to take a step. Like, America was like wrestling. We were trying to take a step into the 21st century, but a bunch of fucking people who didn't really see that were trying to hold us back. Joey Styles was just proposing their point of view, but I don't have anything against the guy as a person. He was just such an easy target because, you know, when you get the conservative Christian crackpots going, you really don't have much trouble taking the piss out of us, as Adrian Street used to say.
Paul Heyman.
I don't know whether he can go on my shit list because this has to be reserved for people that I have no respect for in any way, shape, or form, And while Paul's and I's personal business dealings have been rather fucking checkered, at the same time, I can go ahead and say that he does know what he's doing, that he was a good booker, etc., etc. This is for pure shit.
And
I will live. By the way, I told Dutch Mantell to put this in his book. I don't know if he did or not, because Dutch, you haven't sent me the free one yet. I sent you my address. I will live. I'm making it a point. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm on my low-carb diet and trying to stay away from sugar, etc., because I want to live to stand over and piss upon Vince Russo's grave. For the fans that he's deprived of seeing fucking great wrestling, for the fucking wrestlers whose careers he's shortened, for the fucking people that make their living in the wrestling business who have had elevated blood pressure or fucking lowered fucking income because of his fucking foolishness. Vince, one of these days, I'm making it a mission now in my life. You're going to go before me if I have to make it to 93 just so I can stand there and take a whiz on your fucking headstone, pal. Fuck you.
Well, it's quite an accomplishment to get him off the Bob Evans turkey gravy.
Exactly.
You're pretty important.
It's got chunks of sausage.
Santino.
I could go on in the whole story, but no, actually I should send him a Christmas card too, because they were pushing my buttons for a year looking for a fucking reason. And when I smacked him 17 times, it gave him the reason. And immediately my blood pressure did get better, so no, I have no problems.
Kevin Dunn.
Wow. See who else we come up with. We're saving it over there.
Do you have a quick Kevin Dunn impersonation you'd like to do? A few people have done it on Ken.
Yes, sir. And we're not wrestling. And I don't know why you think we're wrestling. Just because we're wrestlers in wrestling boots and wrestling tights in a wrestling ring.
Fuck you.
Jim Hurd.
Oh boy, Jiminy Pete. I can tell you already, just because he's just, he's a fucking little slime, but just because he's more inoffensive, we gotta stick at it. God damn!
Yeah, it's gonna fill up. ICP.
You know what? That whole thing was blown up out of proportion. Bruce Pritchard showed me a video. I'd never heard of these fucking people. I only listen to music, so why should I have heard of these people? In like 1997, he shows me a videotape of the Japanese hardcore IWA, which I don't watch anyway, but there's Terry Funk and there's Cactus Jack but these fucking people, whoever the fuck they are in their real lives, are doing the commentary. They gave everybody phony names and they're making a joke out of the wrestling business. And Bruce just thought it was hilarious because he likes funny, silly shit. I didn't think it was fucking funny. And when I found out that the Insane Clown Posse were fucking musicians, if I can use that term loosely, then I thought, look, I don't come and fucking make fun of music. Why are you making fun of my business? I was there the night that Victor Quinones, the promoter, and Cactus Jack walked up to him and said, "Where's our check for that tape that you sold?" And to their credit, they cut him a fucking check right on the fucking spot, but I think they make fun of the business. It's that hardcore bullshit. I've seen videotapes of these juggernauts or juggalos or whatever in a mud field fucking watching this shit where they fucking, I don't know, it's like a David Letterman stupid pet trick, but it's humans. I don't get the whole fucking thing. Stay out of my business, I'll stay out of your business.
They're not on the show.
But nah, they're not that important.
Very good. Hulk Hogan.
No, once again, no. I mean, it's sad now that the guy who, except for Austin and Rock, has set more records, made more money, got to be a bigger celebrity, etc. in our business now because of, family situations, divorces and whatever, has to fucking go out there and do that at 60 years old with artificial body parts, trying to convince people that he's going to get a fucking company over when he's never been a booker and he's never gotten a company over. He's been a star. Should have stuck with it.
Rap music.
Oh, heavens to Murgatroyd. There we go. It's got to be way up there.
7 Up.
Not in this company. Although 7-Up does have an aftertaste that Sprite, does not have.
I bet. John's ending.
No.
Okay,
Not even.
well,
We don't have any
let's
copies.
rank these guys now. Now the work begins.
Oh, Jesus. Well, actually, You know what? Okay, what I said about it, I wasn't going to put Paulie up there because I can respect him for some things he's done. Vince McMahon has been, I'll take the cheap shit off. Vince McMahon has been very successful, even though he allowed his minions to fuck me around.
Very good.
I can't do it. Hardcore wrestling is more of a, not a person or a thing, it's more of a fucking, what's the word I'm searching for? An entity concept. I think we gotta go with people who just have no redeeming value whatsoever. 2, 3, 4, 4. Oh shit, wait.
Who do you got? You got another idea? You want to add
John
one?
Laurinaitis.
John Laurinaitis? You want to add one? Get a pen. Let's add.
Once again, not even important
Not
enough.
important enough.
I got to say we're gonna throw Wade off the fucking page because I think right here, if you want to go in this direction right here, you have the 5 worst enemies of the professional wrestling business and the professional wrestling fan, and between the 5 of them, they ain't worth goddamn shit. So, as my mother used to say, they don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. They don't have any talent or haven't had any talent for anything related to professional wrestling. No redeeming quality. Can anybody in this room, I'm holding it up, name something in professional wrestling that any of these people have done well? Great angle, great promo, great performance, great something. The camera's not on you. You're nameless, you're faceless. Give me anything that any of these people have done.
Oklahoma.
Great. I said great.
Stay employed.
Yeah.
A lot of people without jobs. Stay employed.
That's an art right there.
Stay employed.
Sold a lot of pizza.
Made money.
Heavyweight champion.
Got hired. Initially made that transition from...
Somebody said he had a heart attack. I find that hard to believe. You'd had to have found a heart.
Well, that's
There
it.
you
That's the
go.
shit list. That's the shit list. Might not be a bad idea for a column if you ever wanted to write for USA Today or New York Times.
Do you think if I wanted to dwell on these people all the fucking time, see, you just do this to stir me up. If I wanted to dwell on these people all the time, I'd need goddamn be hospitalized.
Well, you can critique things in society, politics, healthcare plans.
But now, why didn't you have a positive top 5? Why didn't you have Jim Cornette's top 5 of all time, the Bobby Heenans or the Mick Foleys or the fucking Ric Flairs or the fucking Christine Jarrett's or fucking Bill Watts's or all the people that I admire and like and that have done things for me and other people and the rest, but no, you have to go for that seamy underbelly of the wrestling business.
You had 4 hours to talk about all the wonderful things.
Well, you rushed
in
me
wrestling.
through everything.
Wait till the next 4. You think this was bad?
You rushed me right through. I
Good
couldn't
stuff.
go into any detail.
TNA. We'll start it with...
Wait a minute. Why would it be?
With a video.
Jimmy Cornette, the Bulldozer, coming at you live from the OffTheMarkShow.com studios, Daddy. What I want to know is, there was a point in time where you made your long-awaited, epic TNA debut, and it was one for the ages. Because I remember what happened. You got a long set yourself, sir, and the king led the crowd. I want to know, how tough was it for you to walk back to the locker room? Because I know you just came back from surgery. And also, was it a tad embarrassing for you, sir?
Well, actually, it wasn't as tough for me to walk back as it was to walk down that ramp. Here's the deal. I just had the knee surgery, and I was still ACL tied up and everything. I was still walking with a cane, and I debuted in June of '06, and it was 150 degrees in the impact zone. And all day I'd been doing the Charlie Chaplin thing, spinning the cane around, you know. So I decided as I go out on the stage and I get a good pop, I'm gonna milk it, and I'm doing this, but my hand is covered with sweat. The foam thing on the cane is sweaty, and it just straight out. And I expected to look over and see some old woman, you know. Like, I said, okay, now I gotta go down the ramp, right? And everybody backstage is like, is he gonna go? And I just, whoops, okay. So, very flat-footed. I don't need no stinging cane. Get down there, cut the promo, and fucking then get out of the ring and walk back flat. It was a good promo. I wasn't embarrassed. I was tickled by it, you know, more than anything. And actually, some people even thought that I meant to do it. And I let them believe that for a while.
Kyle Sands, did you ever have a bowel movement at the TNA Impact Zone?
What, in the bathroom, or you mean
I
just?
take it that's what he wants to know.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I used to go to the bathroom as often as possible so that I fucking calm myself down from choking Russo or fucking walking out, getting the car and leaving.
Greg Pike, do you think TNA will ever charge admission for fans to get into the TNA Impact Zone?
No, but they are planning on charging for you to get out. So.
Paul Miller, courtesy of F4W Online, with Jerry Jarrett having done so well as a booker in Memphis. Why do you think that didn't translate into more success with TNA?
Well, as I know, or as I'm aware, Jerry only wrote the first, 15, 20 shows.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
Jerry was not the booker there very long. And also, did you see anything wrong when Jerry Jarrett left the company? Could you sense something was wrong? I wasn't even there. And to be quite honest, did you ever see Dixie Carter get lost while she was wandering around backstage? No, but I hoped on several
That's
occasions.
from Cornette fan, courtesy of Classics.
But no, here's the thing with Jerry Jarrett and TNA, you know, he started the thing as the pay-per-view, Wednesday night pay-per-view, and then they got television, and then blah, 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 but he was only in the first 6 months or so, and then the direction took a different turn, so I don't, what was the second part of that? I don't really, and I wasn't around at that point. To be honest, I never watched TNA wrestling until, I'm going to say, 4 weeks before I debuted in June of 06, because I still, WWE and me got sideways in July of 05, but I still had an ownership interest in Ohio Valley Wrestling, and so I was still making money off of them. Plus, I was really pissed off at wrestling, and besides Ring of Honor and reunions with the Midnight Express, I wouldn't really want to do anything, and I was waiting on to clear up the OVW TV rights and get a check, so I didn't want to fucking jack that around too much. So basically, I had never watched any TNA because I knew that Vince Russo was involved in it, and I thought there's no reason for me to make myself mad in my own home. And then when he was gone, I just was in the habit of not watching it, so I didn't. But Dutch Mantell had called me a number of occasions. I said, when I get all this straightened out, then I get my knee surgery, finally time was right. So then I was like, oh shit, I better start watching this stuff because I don't know what's going on. And so I watched it, and I liked the show, and I thought it had a lot of potential, and there was guys there, boom, boom, boom. And then, in, I guess it was late September, Dutch calls and says, well, we made some changes in the creative team. I said, oh, great, good, what? Well, we fired everybody but me and Jeff. I said, well, that's probably a step in the right direction. He said, and we hired one guy. I said, who's that? He said, Vince Russo. What? Vince Russo. Why? He can't explain it. Nobody said, that's, by the way, I've asked so many people that have been around so much longer than I, why? Nobody can explain it. Nobody knows. Jeff Jarrett wanted him there. So I said, have Jeff call me. So Jeff called me. I said, this won't work. I don't know why. I'm speechless. I'll just give it a chance. All right, I didn't want to do it on the phone. So I went down the next taping and sat down with Jeff and Dutch and gave my notice. I said, it's going to detract from business. I can't be around this fucking guy. He'll kill everything he touches. I don't want to be involved in it. Let one of your heel, let Abyss, it was a heel in, lay me out, boom, I'll be done. And Jeff basically said, oh, if you no-show, or if you don't come, you're no-showing, I won't accept your notice. Tried it, blah, 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 blah. So that's what happened.
Halloween Havoc 89, courtesy of Wrestling Classics, says, what is the best part of the new TNA of 2010? What is the worst part of the new TNA of 2010? Got a couple hours. What would you like to see show up, who would you like to see show up in TNA that is on the WWE roster?
Boy. The worst part of the new TNA of 2010, everything. The best part of the new TNA of 2010, nothing. Here's why. I don't even care if anybody else shows up in TNA, it's on the WWE roster. It doesn't make a fuck to me. Here's the problem. The problem is, to me, they had a chance to say, okay, we're going to make a statement. We're going to be a new promotion for the 21st century. We're going to fight to get the fucking fans back from the UFC and MMA. We're going to fucking take these guys that we've got on our roster that are young, and we're going to push them, and we're going to get them over, and we're going to use them, the bodies of the older stars to do that while they still are capable. They've got a crew of main eventers that needs to be packed in ice after every performance. I've been saying that to them for a year. Kurt Angle is a machine. He's incredible, but the injuries that he's had, he doesn't need to be wrestling 30-minute matches every night carrying a company on his back. I wanted to see him push the young guys. I wanted to see him do a more serious style. I wanted to see him do an alternative to Vince McMahon. A more credible, logical style, but of course that means getting rid of fucking Vince Russo. And they get rid of everybody but Vince Russo, and I hate to keep harping on this. There they come down now from the heavens to strike me down.
He's got a direct
But the
line.
problem is Vince Russo's incapable of writing anything that approximates sports. He's incapable of writing anything that anybody can believe. But if they had done that, if every restaurant in the world sold hamburgers, why would you want to open up a restaurant selling hamburgers? You want to open up a restaurant selling chicken. And with Vince selling at least having the best marketing on hamburgers, it may not be the best hamburgers, but McDonald's sells the most hamburgers. They ain't the best, but they sell a lot of them. With Vince doing that, open up a chicken restaurant. Let's have some realistic, credible, sports-based presentation to our wrestling. Let's not be so fucking WWE light and do shit with a less of a budget and less talented people involved in the writing of the thing and copy WWE. Let's do something completely different. So when I saw January 4th, it made me glad that I was gone, because let's face it, if I hadn't been fired or released or terminated or whatever you want to call it in September, I would have been gone in October of my own volition. As soon as I figured out that not only are we never getting rid of Russo, but now we're having these other guys come in and put another company out of business 10 years ago. And they're 10 years older. And it's more of the fucking same. Hogan and Bischoff on the January 4th show, when they're in the ring, it's going to be great. It's going to be, they look like they were trying to talk themselves into it. They look like two quasi-celebrities on a fucking fundraising telethon for a goddamn hurricane disaster. I expect to see Hogan say George Bush doesn't like black people. It was fucking embarrassing. And over on the other channel, you got Vince McMahon and Bret Hart. Bret Hart was a fucking legend. Vince McMahon is the boss, but it's a bunch of gray-haired guys yelling at each other about shit that happened 15 years ago. The TNA program made all of their young guys like Beer Money, Matt Morgan, Hernandez, etc. meaningless in favor of guys that have had their best years behind them. Maybe they've done a lot in the business before, but goddamn, it's time to move on. And so the answer is blah. No, TNA had a chance to do something and they fumbled the fucking ball and they ain't gonna get it back.
Well, that answers Todd Packard's question.
Thank you, Todd.
The January 4th show. Clips courtesy of Figure 4. Ask him if the only reason he still slags TNA off is so he can fit the phrase "shine a turd." It's one of his sentences.
Well, it's the phrase "you can't polish a turd." However, after watching TNA of late, I will say that they've increased. As a matter of fact, they bought a Times Square billboard. They hired Hulk Hogan for untold hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and Eric Bischoff and all these other guys. And they've gone all the way from a 1 to a 1.2 or 3. Imagine that. I said recently, if a lot of people are looking at a turd, does it still stink?
Jay Zaretsky from Ontario asked, when TNA is out of business, maybe and hopefully by the time this DVD comes out, will you allow yourself to be interviewed for the inevitable rise and fall of TNA DVD?
Now I have a feeling that there'll be enough video evidence out there. You know, here's the thing. I don't want TNA to fail. I wanted TNA to succeed. That's why I went to work there, because Vince McMahon cannot be allowed to have a monopoly on the professional wrestling business. And then he's embarrassed to admit he's even in the pro wrestling business, so he calls it a monopoly on the sports entertainment business. For the sake of the wrestlers, for the sake of the fans, for the sake of everybody who makes a living in this business, except the billionaire who don't need any more money, you can't be allowed to have a monopoly. There always has to be a place to go, another choice, an alternative. I wanted TNA to be that because it seemed like they had the best advantage toward doing that. They had national television. They had monthly pay-per-view. They had a good crew. You could always have better talent, but they had a good crew. They had everything they needed except a direction and a way to implement that made them stand apart from the WWE, and a guy who respected the business ultimately writing the show. Mm-hmm. And I kept hanging around waiting and waiting and waiting. Sooner or later, somebody's going to smarten up and see this. People laugh at him behind his back in the production meeting every time that they read his fucking drivel that he writes. Eyes roll. on the production crew, from the talent side, from the agents. And it just never got any better. And I'm gobsmacked. I don't know how he does it. Nobody I can ask that have been in the business 20 years knows how he does it. But TNA could have been the alternative to Vince, and now, boy, you know, when on January 4th, when they cut to that crowd shot of Dixie Carter, I figure you look at the phrase buyer's remorse in the dictionary, you have to see her picture. Because what the fuck is she? It's just, Dutch like this. I said one time, I told Dutch Mantel, I said, you know what? I said, the people that know how don't have the money, and the people that have the money don't have a fucking clue how. And unfortunately, I guess it's that way with everything.
Ring of Honor. This would be an 8-hour release if we did 4 hours on wrestling and 4 hours or so in this. Well,
Mr. Cornette, you are with Ring of Honor now, but you had another tenure with Ring of Honor. And during that time period, there was one of the greatest feuds on the indies. It was ROH versus CZW. Take us behind the locker room. Take us to the booking meetings. How did that whole thing play out? Was there any heat between the boys? Was John Zandig the douche I always read that he is? Come on, tell us about that feud. The internet wants to know.
Well, I wasn't in on any of the booking meetings. At the time, Gabe Sapolsky was the booker in Ring of Honor. And he said, well, we're thinking about doing this thing. And basically, I mean, I almost feel like I'm, you know, my God, everybody, you can't expose the wrestling business anymore. But there was such a great passion and emotion in the Ring of Honor and Combat Zone Wrestling thing that I almost feel like I'm, you know, telling kids there was no Santa Claus, say there wasn't really any unprofessional conduct. But at the same time, there was a lot of shooting going on. Because I think that's why it got over, because the fans, remember what I said, Jared always said, you know, when he had Lawler and Dundee working a program with each other, the fans knew Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee didn't like each other because they told the fans, whether they were partners, both baby faces, one of them's a heel, fight each other, whatever, they told the fans at the arena, they told the fans at the convenience store after the matches, you know, they didn't like each other. And Jarrett used that, and they sold out year after year when he put them against each other because the fans knew there was an element there, they were going to beat the piss out of each other. I think hardcore wrestling is the most ridiculous, fucking inane, stupid thing that I've ever seen in my life. And I talked about ECW, you know, they only scratched the surface. This Combat Zone Wrestling bullshit, the broken light tubes, the fluorescent light tubes, the fucking barbed wire, the staple gun, I mean, just anything about it. I think it's fucking ridiculous. I think anybody that perpetrates it has to have their head examined. I think anybody that promotes it ought to be put in fucking jail. That Ian Rotten in the state of Kentucky. Now, the state of Kentucky used to have one of the easiest athletic commissions in the world to get along with. $5 license and fucking have a promoter's license, they wouldn't even send an inspector. Because of Ian Rotten and his hardcore wrestling, getting on the news, people being splattered with blood, guy almost bled to death because he got punctured by a fucking fluorescent light tube, was taken to the hospital, hardcore wrestling invades state. All of a sudden now there's inspectors and there's rules and regulations. You can't have any blood, even accidental blood. Match must end immediately. You'll lose your promoter's license. The licenses cost a fortune more. We immuned the people to simple angles that they could fucking believe that a guy could work and you could still believe he was hurt. It doesn't take any talent to take blunt instruments and bash each other over the fucking head for real in front of 200 people at a goddamn parking lot of a fucking bowling alley for $20 if you get paid at all. It made the fucking business look bad. It made the boys... When I saw the wrestler, I went into a 3-day depression. Because here are people who may not know anything about professional wrestling for the last 20 years since Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania, or I remember Ric Flair or whatever. And now they're thinking, oh my God, that's what happened to all those guys. And now professional wrestling is in a goddamn fucking VFW hall and all the people. I don't even take independent bookings. Because I'm afraid if I go to a fucking show that there's only 200 people at, and I've got my gimmick table out, people look at me and say, oh, now he needs the money too. Fuck, it's fucking embarrassing. It's embarrassing that the average person would would hear that somebody's being stapled with a fucking staple gun or ripped up with broken glass or doing this fucking foolishness. It takes no talent. It takes no art. The people that fucking go and pay to see it, I have serious doubts about their fucking mental capacity, that you would think that's fucking entertainment, which taxes the very definition of the word. And the whole thing is fucking ridiculous. And it's, what if you were a basketball fan and all your life you loved basketball? You got a tickle out of the Harlem Globetrotters, but I mean, at least it was still a fucking athletic fucking show. But mostly you like the Boston Celtics or the goddamn whatever the fuck. And all of a sudden they come up with new rules for basketball. Like I'm sure Vince Russo would like to write. Where you've got to make the inbounds pass through across a flaming table. And if you got to shoot a free throw, you got to shoot it over a fucking 3 coils of barbed wire. And there's a guy on the fucking top of the goddamn basket that's going to fucking try to spear the ball and puncture it and throw a spear at you and whatever the fuck. People, what the fuck is this? Why would anybody want to be involved in this? Why the fuck would anybody want to be involved in a situation where they're going to be ripped up with barbed wire, bashed with fucking light tubes, cut with broken glass, snapped with mouse traps, and hit with a fucking staple gun? I made $15,000 for fucking WrestleMania. I took one bump and it was a shitty one because Luger threw a shitty punch. I made $10,000 for jumping off that fucking scaffold and regretted that. And somebody's going to do that shit to themselves for $20 because, like Ian Rotten, they have some kind of inordinate need to be somebody in front of a few fucking deluded fucking delinquent fucking people at a goddamn bowling alley in fucking West Fuckwad, Indiana. It just makes everybody in our business look like fucking morons. And that's what I conveyed in the Ring of Honor fucking CZW angle and meant every fucking word of it, and people loved it because they bought it because they knew it was real.
Very good, Zach.
But everybody involved was professional. Even though Zandig couldn't say suey if the hogs had him, I blistered him on the fucking promo. But how can you defend the indefensible?
Zach Lambert, when you first made an appearance in Ring of Honor back in 2003, did you think it would grow into the company it is today?
I did not. I was hoping so, but to be honest, I thought, it was a good independent show, and I thought, this was going to be a good independent show. But now, that's why I've always been a fan of theirs. I always got along well with Kerry. I've never had any problems with Gabe. Like Adam Pearce, the booker, all the people that work there, the guys, they always work hard. That's why I'm there now. But that's why I'm saying, I guess I've always felt there's needed to be an alternative. I was hoping TNA would be that because they were best equipped financially, but they're not going to be. So, the next day after the TNA thing happened, Kerry called me and they'd gotten the television, they'd gone through the pay-per-view thing. I think they put the cart before the horse. I think it's hard to have pay-per-view before you have television. TNA found that out. But I would have never dreamed they'd be on national television on HDNet, 7 years later. And I never dreamed they'd still be a high-profile company and actually being more high-profile with the big shows in New York and etc. So I'm happy, but I didn't think that at the time.
Ring of Honor, it's finally come to the big time. It's on HDNet. But Jimmy, I've got to be honest, I really liked Ring of Honor back in the day. The likes of Loki, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Spanky. I know you don't like the name Spanky, but hey, Spanky, it's kind of funny. Anyway, I want to know, what did you think about Ring of Honor then versus now? And also, do you have any booking power now, or are you strictly an on-air talent, per se?
Per se. I like the way you per se. Adam Pearce is the booker, but I obviously can make suggestions, and that's what my job is. Executive producer can be anything, and whether it's open up a new market for live events, or I've got a connection to find a sponsorship, or somebody to help promote, or hey, I think we could do this on television. They're listening and they're letting me do that because I want the company to succeed. Not doing it for the money at this point. I'm doing it because I want there to be an alternative. I know everybody when Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels were in Ring of Honor. I did too. I thought they were great. But if you notice, you never get a new star over until the old star leaves. So when they went on their way, then along came the Briscoes and Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness, and everybody, wow, these guys. Well, now Bryan and Nigel have left. Thank God Briscoes are around. But here comes Austin Aries and Tyler Black. Tyler Black's 23 years old. Fuck, he's hardly been able to legally vote for fucking 2 years. You know, I think he's going to be a star. I think a lot, Roderick Strong. I don't want to leave anybody out. I want to say a lot of names, but Brent Albright I've always been a big fan of. Davari just started. Sean Davari just started the last TV tapings. He was very underutilized in a variety of ways. You can never get a big star over until the previous star leaves. Jackie Fargo had to hand the torch to Jerry Lawler. Bruno Sammartino had to pass it off to, well, he didn't pass it to Bob Backlund. But you know what I'm saying. So basically, guys are always going to move. They're always going to go on to another job, or bigger and better, or sometimes smaller and lesser. But ultimately, I think Ring of Honor has proven that they are a new style of wrestling. They let the wrestlers do their shit, and they let the fans decide who they like, and then we go from there. And I want to keep doing that. I want to steal some of the UFC fans. I want to steal some of the MMA fans. I want to take the young 20-something, maybe 30-something guys that don't have the big national names, but they got hunger and they got talent, and I want to try to help create a framework where wrestling, I want to do pro wrestling as it was done in the 80s with guys that were born in the 80s. Imagine that. Treat it seriously, be logical, let the guys go out and be themselves and get over, sell the guys based on their personalities and not a bunch of fucking hokey gimmicks, and don't insult people's attention or insult people's intelligence and just start slapping them in the face that we're phony, it's all a show, fucking cartoon. No. Why do you think they like UFC? It's real, yes, but it's also because we understand it. I know this guy, I know that guy, I know why they're going to fight, let's see who's going to win. That's the basis of pro wrestling. So anyway.
All right, another video. Stephen M.
This is going to take a long fucking time, ain't it?
Hello, Mr. Cornette, James E. Cornette, Jim Cornette, whichever you prefer to be called. I'm a big fan of you, and I'm glad that you have come back to the Ring of Honor crew. I actually have 2 questions for you. If you can't answer both, that's perfectly fine. The first one I'd like to say is that we all know John Cena is the main guy in WWE. But who in ROH do you think could be the next John Cena and why? And I guess the other question would be is that who in WWE do you feel is not getting the deserving push that they should and why?
Okay, well, first of all, I would never say somebody else is going to be the next John Cena. I know what he's asking. Who's going to be the next big star? Because to me, everybody ought to be individuals. The reason why wrestlers don't get over better than they do now these days is because they got writers putting words in their mouth. They can't get themselves over. I think Tyler Black is a superstar waiting to happen, but he's too young right now. He needs more seasoning. He needs more time. But you get a 27, 28-year-old Tyler Black, athletically as good as he is, but then getting this up here, and I think you got a superstar. The Briscoes as a tag team are unique. I love their promos, which everybody's, oh, the Briscoes can't talk. No, the Briscoes are the most legitimate, real, credible promo in professional wrestling today because they sound they talk, they do their promo exactly like they talk. You can't tell the difference between on and off camera, and they're naturals. So I love that, and they're unique once again. So, and secondly, what was the second part of his question?
Was it stars in?
It was
underutilized in WWE.
Underutilized in WWE. I don't want to call any names right now because that would stooge me that I'd never watch the fucking TV show because it gives me gas. But all the guys that were in OVW developmental from 2002 until 2005. Just write all their names down.
Very good. Mark Berry, will Ring of Honor ever start doing house shows in the South? I think that St. Louis, Nashville, Memphis, Atlanta would be great stops for you guys.
Bada bing, Charlotte, North Carolina. April the 3rd, you may be watching this after that, but the Big Bang takes place April 3rd, and the reason why that we chose Charlotte, North Carolina, just an example, all the big-time independent shows in the Carolinas, which was a rich wrestling market over the past several years that have drawn big crowds, have been Legends-based shows. Mm-hmm. We think that the fans that loved wrestling in the Carolinas, we were predisposed to like wrestling, and the new fans that like wrestling and haven't seen anything that they like lately, all of them will like Ring of Honor. The Big Bang, it all begins again. Pro wrestling explodes into the 21st century. After Charlotte, we got our eyes, we're doing the paperwork to get promoters' licenses in Kentucky. WrestleMania next year is going to be taking place in Atlanta, and Ring of Honor sort of has a little tradition. I think a lot of those towns, we want to open up more live markets. I've talked to a lot of people who have experience promoting local wrestling shows and have done very well with it, and we're going to start using those people to help us. And so the South and the Midwest and all parts in between is on the roster.
Very good. Mark O'Connell, what are your thoughts on Ring of Honor suing Ric Flair?
Well, and you phrased it nicer than this guy up here did, but it's the same question. You know, I wasn't here. That was before I started. I'm not sure what the situation was. Basically, I understand that Rick was paid money in advance to make appearances, that then once that Vince found out that Ring of Honor was on television, you may remember Vince McMahon doesn't have a fucking clue of what's going on in the professional wrestling business anywhere other than his own company. And then he said, well, I don't think you got to be doing the TV, and Rick didn't do the TV, and apparently the money didn't get paid back. I don't want to get in the middle of it. I like Kerry Silk, and he's a friend of mine. I believe what he says, but Ric Flair has helped me a lot in my career, gave me my first booking job, recommended me for the highest paying job I ever had, which was not, by the way, working for Vince McMahon. So I don't want to get in the middle of them, but I think it's a shame that a guy with the reputation and just the man, Ric Flair, is having problems with wrestling promoters when probably I would say that for 20 years, if you were a wrestling promoter, the most dependable thing that you could hear, the best thing you could hear on your card was, I got Ric Flair, because you knew he was going to be there, you knew he was going to tear the house down, you knew he was going to sell some tickets. Now shit's going sideways, and I hate to see it.
Volume 1 is in the
Volume
books.
1. And I was being brief, folks. I'm sorry.